Chapter 1050. Dustless opened his mouth. Although he was surprised, he still shook his head. Jugram's risky move was within Dustless's expectations. Quincy's goal was naturally to destroy Shinigami and kill Soul King. Aizen's goal was the same. Even if the two sides hit it off, it would still be in line with each other's goals. After all, Shinigami was their enemy. But I don't think Aizen will cooperate with Jugram. After a while, Dustless confirmed. Although it was just his personal guess, he was very certain. Indeed, Wandless Empire's internal affairs say that Aizen is an ambitious man who wants to become a god. The chances of him lowering himself and submitting to Quincy are 0. Candice chimed in. Dustless looked at the two and asked curiously, "Then what's your Empire's evaluation of me?" "No matter how bad I am, I'm still better than my predecessor, East Sendai, right?" Hearing this, Candice and Bambietta looked at each other with a hint of ridicule in their eyes. "It can't be that he's not even as good as that kid from East Deity Palace, right?" Wuchen covered his old face in disappointment, as if he was speechless. "That's not it." The two women shook their heads at the same time. Bambietta said, "Jugram recently created a special fighting force, and you're one of them." Wuchen was stunned when he heard that and asked subconsciously, "Special combat power?" "You didn't remember wrong, did you?" There were indeed special existences like special combat powers, but they would only appear after Yhwach fully recovered and attacked Soul Society. "Right, no matter what, you have to be careful. Jugram isn't a good person." Bambietta frowned and reminded him with good intentions. "You." Dustless showed a dissatisfied expression and scolded with a straight face, "I won the competition just now. Didn't I say that you're not allowed to talk about you? You have to call me young master." Bambietta's delicate face was full of confusion. She couldn't even call Dustless Lord. She had to call him young master. This seemingly trivial matter was very important to Dustless. He was even narrow-minded and couldn't be changed. Speaking of which, thinking of the great void Ajuchas that invaded Hueco Mundo, Dustless asked, "Soul Society invaded a great void with the ability to kill Quincy, you killed it?" The two asked in unison with nervousness. Dustless nodded. The Mantis Great Void was indeed killed by him, cut into pieces by Hado 90. "That's bad. The memories and soul of the Great Void you killed will all fall into Yhwach's hands in the end," Bambietta said solemnly. This meant that Yhwach would know the moves and characteristics of Wuchen when he woke up in the future. No. You're mistaken about one thing." Seeing that the two of them had misunderstood, Dustless immediately corrected them. "I don't care about that. I don't even know how many abilities and moves I have. What I care about is that since voids can obtain the ability to kill Quincy, the Grim Reaper should be able to do the same." Looking at Candice and Bambietta expectantly, Dustless's face was full of hope. If possible, he very much wanted to seize Yhwach's ability. Theoretically, it should be possible, but we don't know the specifics. The abilities of the Sternritter Regiment are all given by Yhwach. Candice instantly understood Dustless's intention. He was probably aiming for Yhwach's abnormal ability. "But, I advise you. Young master, you should stop dreaming." Seeing Dustless staring at her gloomily, Bambietta's expression stiffened. She quickly changed her words and said unwillingly, "Although I don't know how strong Yhwach is, those who have seen how terrifying he is are all afraid of him." Bambietta said in a trembling voice. Her tone was also full of fear and dread because the name Yhwach was, to some extent, a god. "Forget it. Go back. If you come out late, Jugram, who is naturally suspicious, will inevitably be suspicious." With a heartwarming smile, Dustless ordered them to leave. "This guy is not bad." Bambietta secretly glanced at Dustless and muttered in her heart. Although Dustless sometimes looked sloppy and had a cynical attitude toward everything, she could feel that Dustless was not a cold-blooded person like Jugram. Especially when she was quite close to Dustless just now, Bambietta felt that he was warm. At least, he had body temperature. The night sky of Soul Society was full of stars, and the scenery was very charming. As night fell, Dustless walked alone to the 7th Division. He thought that when he returned to the division, he would be greeted with good wine and delicious food. Who would have thought that the entire captain's office was filled with the strong smell of alcohol, and the pungent smell made people retreat. A soldier's drunken, a general's drunken. This saying is true. Opening the door of the captain's office, Dustless stepped in. The first thing he saw was Hinamori, Rukia, and Matsumoto Ranjaku. They were all drunk and completely unconscious. Forget it. I'm in a good mood today. I'll let you go. Picking up the blanket on the sofa and covering them, Dustless turned around and left. Tiredness spread all over his body, and he had to find a suitable place to rest. However, God often likes to play tricks on people. Sometimes, the more tired you are and the more you want to sleep, the more troublesome it is. Chapter 1051. In the dark, a young man's silhouette could be clearly seen. He was thin and had silver hair. A cold wind blew, making his captain's Haori dance in the wind. The word 6 could be clearly seen. Captain Ikamaru Jin, why are you here so late at night? Dustless pretended to be surprised. In fact, he knew that Ikamaru Jin would come looking for Matsumoto Renanju because Matsumoto Jin's childhood sweetheart was Renanju. At this moment, Ikamaru Jin's expression wasn't as sly as before. But his mouth was still raised, and his eyes were narrowed. His smile wasn't as playful as before. Instead, it was like a hunter sizing up his prey. But now, Ikamaru Jin was smiling coldly. Dustless took Matsumoto Renanju behind his back. It wasn't hard to guess what Ikamaru Jin was thinking. I also have nothing to do. During this period, I heard that Captain Wuchen found a few talented female students, so I wanted to pay my respects to them in advance. Ikamaru Jin said calmly. There's a problem. Dustless raised his eyebrows. He immediately noticed Ikamaru Jin's strange behavior. Although he hadn't offended Aizen, both sides were secretly fighting each other. Sorry, Captain Ikamaru Jin might be disappointed. They are already asleep. Dustless directly refused. Dustless felt that Ikamaru Jin wasn't that simple. Since he pulled Matsumoto Renanju and the others into the 7th Division, he wouldn't let them be in danger. This cunning fox only had Matsumoto Renanju in his heart. He was cold to everyone else. It's just a meeting. Captain Dustless, you don't have to be so cold. Ikamaru Jin touched his chin and smiled. He was also very calm. Dustless clearly felt that the surroundings were extremely cold. The humidity was affected by Ikamaru Jin's murderous aura, and there were signs of it freezing. Cold and heartless. Dustless repeated Ikamaru Jin's words. He said coldly, Captain Ikamaru Jin, what do you think will happen if you put a sinister snake in a sheep pen? Of course, Ikamaru Jin didn't even think about it. He stared at the faint smile on Dustless's face and realized that Dustless was implying something. That sinister snake was obviously cursing him. I didn't expect Captain Dustless to be so good at talking. Ikamaru Jin's expression changed a little bit. Then he opened his eyes and looked at the 7th Division's captain's office. Then he turned around and left. So quick. That's impossible. How could he leave without seeing Matsumoto Renanju? Looking at Jin's back, Dustless pondered over his motive. So Matsumoto Jin. Of course, Matsumoto Renanju Matsumoto be Matsumoto be Matsumoto Matsumoto be Matsumoto eyes and Jin, sharp eyes suspiciously looking at him. Staring. Was, Isisisic. Jin was sharp, Jin looking. Looking up, he saw a huge white light coming at him. Of course, there was also the sound of a fatal attack. Shoot him, Shinigami. The cold light flashed rapidly. Because it was too sharp, people didn't dare to open their eyes. It extended without limit and almost pierced through Wu Qin in the blink of an eye. That's all you got? Ikamaru Jin said to himself as he put away his Zanpakuto. Just like being melted by the divine spear, Dustless's entire person vanished without a trace. You're right, I heard that your Zanpakuto is very strong, but it seems that it's all you got. Thousands of fireflies swept across the pitch-black sky. In a flash, it was as bright as day. Gathering behind Ikamaru Jin, Dustless, who had a cold expression, mercilessly sent out a small foot covered in light. Light speed kick. Kakaka. The wall 100 meters away cracked, and Ikamaru Jin was stuck in it. However, this kind of normal attack couldn't do any damage to him. He was almost unharmed. No wonder Aizen let Jin stay by his side even though he knew that he was up to no good. I thought he was just a passerby. Now it seems that I was wrong. As soon as he said that, another powerful attack came. Since it was Ikamaru Jin who attacked first, Dustless didn't hold back. Bansho Tensei. He raised his hand, and an endless gravitational force covered Ikamaru Jin's body. He started to float uncontrollably. You took the initiative to close the distance with me. Stupid. Do you know what ability my Zanpakuto has? Sensing the gravitational force covering his body, Ikamaru Jin's smile got bigger. He didn't resist. Instead, he rushed at him at an even faster speed. In the blink of an eye, the Zanpakuto fell from the sky. You're the stupid one, Captain Ikamaru Jin. Staring at the falling cold light without changing his expression, Wu Qin opened his hands, and a repulsive force that was diametrically opposite to gravity erupted. Shinra Tensei. Just as Dustless was about to be cut in half, the repulsive force came out of nowhere. Ikamaru Jin's smile froze, and an unstoppable force forced him back. Caught off guard, Ikamaru Jin was sent flying again. I just stole your childhood friend. I just pulled Matsumoto Renanke into the 7th division. I'm not even marrying her. Why are you so agitated? Even though Ikamaru Jin covered it up perfectly, Dustless could still see what he was really thinking. His childhood friend was stolen by Dustless. He was heartbroken. Chapter 1052. Dustless scolded Jin for being so narrow-minded. I just stole your childhood sweetheart. I didn't kill your parents. Why are you acting like you hate me so much? Leave if you know what's good for you. I can treat it as if nothing happened. There won't be anyone gossiping at the head captain's place. Wu Qin assured. Jin stood up, his eyes didn't waver, obviously he didn't care about Dustless's words. This kid is willing to do anything for Matsumoto Ranjaku. I remember that he was lurking around Sosuke Aizen to avenge Matsumoto Ranjaku. Dustless said with a hint of admiration. Leave. I'm not the kind of person who knows what's good for him. Ikamaru Jin refused without hesitation as he raised his Zanpakuto. Wiping the blood from his mouth, Jin said, beating up a captain, it's not a small matter to the head captain. To the head captain. Captain Jin, don't you think you're ridiculous? The head captain doesn't have time to deal with this kind of trivial matter. Dustless couldn't help but despise him. When he was about to pounce on Jin, a black shadow blocked his way. His face was very gentle, he had a smile on his face, he was wearing glasses, he looked like a gentleman, and his body exuded a strong scholarly aura. The first impression he gave was that he was elegant, calm. Captain Aizen. What do you want? Dustless glanced at Sosuke Aizen and asked indifferently. In the Godai 13, Dustless hated him the most, and no one would be able to accept this person who was everywhere and thought himself to be the smartest. Two captains dueling at night, this is not in accordance with the rules of Soul Society. Sosuke Aizen touched his eyes and smiled gently. If Dustless didn't know about his dark history, he might have been fooled. Captain Aizen, you should say this to Captain Jin. Pointing at Ikemura's silver who was holding a dagger in his hand, Wuchen acted as if it was none of his business. Captain Dustless, you're treating me like an outsider. I just want to meet the members of the 7th Division. Why do you have to stop me? Ikemura Jin regained his sly smile. His smile was extremely annoying. Sorry, they don't want to see you. After that, Dustless entered the team house without turning around. As for Jin and Sosuke Aizen, he directly ignored them, treating them as air. Waxy Aizen Sosuke raised his head and gave Ikemura Jin a cryptic look. Ikemura Jin nodded and attacked. You don't know what's good for you, I don't want to take you seriously. Noticing the dark shadow behind him, Dustless's killing intent rose. An absurd idea suddenly popped up in his mind. He couldn't wait to go back and ravage Matsumoto Ranjaku in various ways. When did I become like this? Dustless shook his head and tried to wake himself up. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, Jin was closing in on Dustless. He was about to chop off Dustless's head. Clang clang clang. At the critical moment, Aizen rushed over and blocked the attack for Dustless, and kicked Jin Ikemura back. Captain Jin, we're colleagues, we can talk things out, there's no need to kill. Sosuke Aizen said with a pained expression. Get out of my way if you don't want to get hurt, or else. Jin said coldly. Impossible. Sosuke Aizen said firmly. If you want to hurt Dustless, you'll have to step over my dead body. What are these two idiots doing? Wuchen, who was about to step into the 7th Division, stopped and retracted his footsteps. He put his hands in his wide sleeves and looked at the scene in front of him with interest. Although I know Sosuke Aizen and Jin are doing this on purpose, what's their goal? Dustless sat down casually. He didn't feel sleepy at all. He looked at the strange battle in front of him. Aizen was probably the one who arranged this. Clang clang clang. Without waiting for Dustless to come up with an explanation, Ikemura Jin and Aizen Sosuke broke out in a fierce battle. Their Zanpakuto collided with each other. Boom boom boom. In the dark night sky, the deafening collision of the Zanpakuto continued, and the sparks from the friction of the Zanpakuto didn't stop. Ikemura Jin and Aizen Sosuke were sweating profusely. Puchi. After a few breaths, the temporary victor was decided. A bloody wound was left on Aizen Musuk's body, but Jin easily sent him flying with a kick. He was pushed back 100 meters. Captain Jin, you're very strong. It seems that I can't defeat you without using my Zanpakuto. Sosuke Aizen raised his Zanpakuto. No wonder Jin provoked me, and Aizen took the opportunity to stop the fight. It turned out to be for this. I thought you two had prepared some kind of script, but it turned out to be so ugly and vulgar. Dustless looked at Aizen with disdain. I guess you want to find a suitable opportunity to let me see Aizen use Kyoka Suigetsu. Unfortunately, you're doomed to fail. Knowing Aizen Sosuke's intention, Dustless did as he wished. His two dark eyes locked onto Kyoka Suigetsu and observed the slender Zanpakuto's blade. Dustless can't wait to be hit by Kyoka Suigetsu. Anyway, it doesn't hurt him. He only needs to use armament haki when fighting, and Aizen can also reduce the attention on him. He can even use Kyoka Suigetsu when Aizen is confident. Chapter 1053. Dustless stared at Aizen, or rather, his Zanpakuto. In Soul Society, the person that Aizen was most worried about was undoubtedly Dustless. Strength was one thing, but the bigger reason was that Dustless hadn't seen the release of Kyoka Suigetsu. On a whim, Aizen teamed up with Ikemura Jin to test this conspiracy. Idiot, I'll say goodbye from now on. Seeing Dustless staring at his Zanpakuto curiously, Aizen smiled. Although the captains of Soul Society were all colleagues, in a sense, they were also competitors. Everyone wanted to know each other's Zanpakuto and their abilities. Humph. Idiot, do you think your Kyoka Suigetsu ability is invincible? He's as innocent as a kid. On the surface, he looked like a curious baby, but in his heart, Wu-chin sneered. In this world, the only thing that could make Dustless wary was Yhwach's heaven-defying ability. Although the catoptric deflection was powerful and heaven-defying enough, it had little effect on Dustless. It didn't even have any effect, as long as he closed his eyes and used Kanbunchaku Haki. In this world, only absolute strength could be relied on. After a while, Sosuke Aizen released his Zanpakuto and Jin Ikamaru stopped fighting and left without saying a word, not even bothering to explain. Perhaps in Sosuke Aizen's eyes, anyone who saw Kyoka Suigetsu's Shirkai was no longer qualified to be his opponent. They were nothing more than pawns. Captain Aizen, Urahara Kasuke's half-Hogyoku, shouldn't we take the opportunity to snatch it? Ikamaru Jin took a deep look at the 7th Division's house, as if he was looking for Matsumoto Ranjaku. He turned to Aizen and asked. There's no need to draw legs on a snake, he's already immersed in Kyoka Suigetsu, and don't you think it's a good thing that Hogyoku is in his hands? Sosuke Aizen analyzed wisely, it would be best if he can create Hogyoku, then we can take advantage of the situation. Aizen smirked. Even if he can't create a perfect Hogyoku, he'll lose his value, although it wasn't explicitly stated, the meaning was self-evident. A person who had lost his value could only die in the end. But he's very strong, unimaginably strong. According to the news from Hueco Mundo, even Vastolord couldn't withstand a single blow from him. Ikamaru Jin reminded. He had heard of Dustless sweeping through Hueco Mundo. At that time, Squad Zero had also been tricked by Dustless. There's no doubt that the man is very strong. If it's a one-on-one fight, I'm not his opponent. I'm afraid the only one in Soul Society who can suppress him is the head captain. Aizen didn't want to give up, but at the same time, he admired Dustless. Dustless had only been a Shinigami for a year, but he had achieved more than he had in hundreds of years. But have you forgotten that the biggest advantage of my mirror's image is not to confuse the enemy, Aizen said proudly and confidently. If a one-on-one fight doesn't work, then I'll use mirror's image to command the power of the entire Soul Society to deal with that man. Although he trusted the ability of mirror's image very much, Aizen liked to be prepared for everything. His success today has a lot to do with his meticulous mind. Who told the idiots of Godii 13 to listen to the orders of Central 46? It's a pity that such a good chess piece didn't squeeze out the last bit of its value. Don't you think so, Jin? Yes, Captain Aizen. Idiot. Looking at the disappearing backs of Ikamaru Jin and Aizen, Dustless sneered. Aizen's mirror's image can hypnotize the 5 senses, but the observation haki is outside the 5 senses. The chance of Aizen defeating him with this ability is 0. Even the conversation between Aizen and Ikamaru Jin was heard clearly by Dustless. What a blatant plan. He should be waking up soon. Looking down at the blue round bead in his hand, Dustless muttered to himself. The mysterious black and purple light contained a magical power, penetrating a faint purple mist. If you perceive it carefully, you will be surprised to find that it's a very dense materialized Ryatsu. The bead in his hand is the Hogyoku. Aizen. You don't deserve to have the Hogyoku. It would be impolite for me to accept it on your behalf. Feeling the cool touch of the Hogyoku, Dustless raised the corner of his mouth. His face was full of satisfaction, and of course, a touch of disappointment. Getting the Hogyoku is indeed something to be happy about, but so far, Dustless's Zanpakuto hasn't moved at all. As a Shinigami, Dustless is embarrassed that he doesn't have a Zanpakuto. Zaraki Kenpachi is stronger than him, and he has a Zanpakuto. Now, Dustless can only use the first Hogyoku. Forget it. Since Aizen used the ability of Mirror's Image on me, it means that Aizen should be doing something in the near future. After thinking about it, Dustless felt relieved. He can't force the Zanpakuto, and he can't force it. What's more, according to Dustless's current strength, obtaining the Hogyoku is like adding wings to a tiger, and the Zanpakuto is actually dispensable. Chapter 1054. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 5 months had passed. Perhaps because of the different concept of time of death, these 5 months, Dustless only felt like a snap of the fingers, slipped away without any consciousness. During this period, the Hogyoku also completely awakened. Why don't I feel anything? Dustless was puzzled, looking at the smooth chest. In the center, there was obviously a mysterious blue bead inlaid. A day ago, Dustless had implanted the Hogyoku into his body. But to his disappointment, there was not even a fart reaction, let alone evolution. Definitely no feeling. When your Ryatsu bottoms out, I will provide you with power. When your life is oppressed, when you fear death, you can evolve. The surface of the Hogyoku flashed a mysterious halo. At this moment, a strange voice suddenly invaded Dustless's mind. Are you the consciousness of the Hogyoku? Hearing this, Dustless was not surprised. The Hogyoku did have its own consciousness, but to his surprise, this clear voice was no different from a 15 or 16-year-old girl, very clear and pleasant. Only by fear of death can I evolve. Dustless frowned. He may not be able to evolve in this life. There seems to be no one in this world who can make him feel fear. Yes, only when the host is afraid of death, and wants to get stronger, can you evolve. The consciousness of the Hogyoku confirmed. Only by fear can I evolve. This requirement is too difficult. Dustless couldn't help but feel a headache. He can only pin his hope on Habak, hoping that he can bring him fear. But it doesn't matter, it's also very good to get unlimited Ryatsu. Dustless showed a smile and immediately said loudly, Wanju, quickly bring my captain's Haori, I'm going to be late for the captain's meeting. That old man is really bored, he always wants to hold a meeting. Thinking of old man Yamamoto, Dustless couldn't help but complain. The 7th Division needs to increase the members, at least a few nannies to wait on you. Matsumoto Ranjaku shouted in dissatisfaction. She threw Captain Haori to Dustless and immediately fell onto Dustless's bed. Gulp. Dustless awkwardly took a deep breath and looked at Matsumoto Ranju's voluptuous body. Matsumoto Ranjaku was only wearing simple pajamas, which couldn't hide her hot body at all. Moreover, Seoul Society's clothes were very strange, everything seemed to be transparent. Get up. Dustless nudged Matsumoto Ranjaku, but she obviously didn't buy it and fell asleep. Her body was filled with the smell of alcohol. Apparently, she drank again last night. Seeing this scene, Dustless was particularly depressed. Hinamori and Rukia were really good, doing things in an orderly manner. Matsumoto Ranjaku, on the other hand, was nothing but a drunkard. Dustless, however, was that this guy actually wanted him to pay for the drinks. A black butterfly suddenly stopped beside the ship and attracted Dustless's attention. Hell butterfly. Frowning, Dustless quickly put on his clothes and rushed to the 1st Division. In the 1st Division's building, the captains were gathered, and the atmosphere was tense. Captain Nya, give this old man an explanation. The angry rebuke exploded, and everyone looked at the miserable Nya Maori. Because of Aizen's Hogyoku, the souls of the Shinigami kept disappearing in Rukuen Street, and the number of students in the academy decreased greatly. Yamamoto began to blame Mayuri. As the captain of the 12th Division, he was responsible for monitoring Seoul Society's every move. Naturally, he blamed Mayuri for the inexplicable disappearance of the souls. It's hard to guard against a thief in the family. This old man is unlucky. With Aizen Sosuke helping him, he won't be able to find out who did it. Looking at Mayuri with pity, Dustless looked at Aizen. There was no need to guess who did it, only one person would do it, Aizen Sosuke. This, Mayuri's face turned black, he wanted to quibble, but he didn't dare to say more. He didn't know who did it, and the head captain would kill him if he spoke nonsense. In desperation, he took out a bunch of useful information, hoping that the head captain would calm down. It seems to be this guy. Mayuri handed the photos to the captains and said with a headache, I don't know what kind of monster this guy is, but he doesn't look like a Shinigami, and he doesn't look like a hollow. Anyway, his strength is boundless. I sent people to investigate in secret, but they were all killed by this guy. It turned out to be him. His pupils shrank. Witnessing the voice of the mysterious monster in the photo, Wu Chen's bored eyes flashed a bright light, and his expression was also very surprised. No wonder Mayuri's people were killed, this monster is really strong. Dustlis showed an interested expression. He thought that Aizen would need a few years to create the monster in the photos, but now it's out of the blue. The monster in the picture could be called a greater void, but its void hole was blocked, and it was wearing a mask. There were 2 bone horns on its forehead, which were extremely sharp. Its entire body was pitch black, and it looked very mysterious. Chapter 1055. Dustlis was speechless. The captains discussed among themselves. This was the first time they saw such a strange creature. What is this? After a while, the head captain muttered in confusion. His eyes were filled with curiosity as he looked at Mayuri. This was his specialty. However, the head captain was going to be disappointed this time. Mayuri shrugged helplessly with a blank expression. This was the first time he had seen such a strange thing. I remember this void is called Void White. It's a void created from the soul of a Shinigami. It's very strong. I think it's on the same level as Vastolord, maybe even stronger. Compared to the captains who didn't know, Dustlis was familiar with it. It was the void created by the future Shinozaki Ichigo. Captain Sama, Aizen stood up and politely said, no matter what this guy is, he only went to 3 places, Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the modern world. Aside from that, there are no other places. Dustlis sneered and immediately attacked Aizen. Captain Aizen, you want to send a Shinigami to the modern world and Hueco Mundo, but we don't have that many people. Ha! Aizen smiled calmly and said, of course, I'm not going there to wait. That stupid method won't work. What I mean is, since this monster likes to hunt souls, we should take the initiative to lure it. We don't even know its location, how can we lure it? Dustlis sneered. He felt Aizen's motives weren't pure. It's simple. Didn't Captain Nye say that the monster likes to eat souls? That means it likes people with high Ryatsu. Aizen smiled and said confidently, I think it's most likely to go to Luhan Street or the modern world. It shouldn't have the ability to enter Hueco Mundo. Dustlis glanced at Aizen and then looked away. Dustlis was sure that Aizen didn't have good intentions because Sosuke Aizen was the one who created Void. Now that he was released for no reason, there must be a conspiracy. Leave Soul Society's Drifting Soul Street to me. I will tear that bastard apart and return peace to Drifting Soul Street. A rough voice came. Looking up, it was the hungry Zaraki Kenpachi, waving his Sanpakuto excitedly as if he was on steroids. This brat has also learned this trick. Public morals are really degenerating these days. Dustlis couldn't help but feel helpless. Even Zaraki, who loved to fight, was talking about peace. Among all the captains, he was the one who was most eager for something big to happen. Raising his eyebrows, a captain who rarely spoke suddenly stood up, then the modern world dash, leave the modern realm to me. Dustlis glanced at the person and immediately stepped forward to answer. Everyone's eyes focused on Dustlis and immediately looked at the captain who just spoke. This person was the current captain of the 10th Division, Ishin Shiba. Dustlis recognized this person. He was the father of the future Shinozaki Ichigo. In the future, he would be in cahoots with Urahara Kasuke and the others. Then Captain Dustless will go to the modern realm. Yamamoto nodded and said, "That's not good. I heard that there are a lot of Quincy in the modern realm. Why don't you come with us? It would be best if you can catch some for me to experiment on." Hee. Mayuri laughed sinisterly as he waved his slender fingernails that were comparable to blades. "Quincy." Yamamoto's cloudy eyes emitted a chill and immediately said coldly, "Although the chance of being attacked by Quincy is 0, it's good to go to the modern realm together. At least we can take care of each other." Dustless heard this and stared at Yamamoto. Maybe other people thought that Quincy was finished, but the captain knew very well. Quincy wasn't completely finished. 1,000 years ago, he didn't kill Yawatch, he only sealed it. But why is Sosuke Aizen so confident? Isn't he afraid that I will kill Void White? Dustless frowned deeply. He was sure that Aizen spent a lot of money to create Void White. He was a greater Void White that was comparable to Vastolord. He was the accumulation of countless souls. It would be a loss if he was killed. After all, he spent a lot of effort to create Void White. And that Isshin Shiba, his eyes turned and fell on the usually low-key Isshin Shiba. In Dustless's impression, the number of times he spoke could be counted on one hand. But now, he chose to take the initiative to attack. It was the opposite of his usual low-key self. "Forget it, let's talk about it in the modern realm." Dustless didn't bother with the things he didn't understand. He just needed to deal with them as they came. There was no need to do anything superfluous. In front of absolute strength, all schemes and tricks were useless. This was the basis of Dustless's confidence. Aizen's schemes wouldn't have any substantial effect. They would only humiliate themselves and become a joke. Even Isshin Shiba was the same. If he had any ulterior motives, he could just kill him as soon as possible. After all, they were in the modern realm. He could push the blame to Hueco Mundo. After about half an hour, the captain's meeting ended. Tomorrow, Dustless and Isshin Shiba would leave Soul Society and go to the modern realm. Chapter 1056. In the sky above Kangzucho, the void was distorted. Two figures floated in the air, looking down at the crowded city below. Although I'm not used to it, I've been in Soul Society all year round. Changing to the modern world all of a sudden, it's quite exquisite. Shiba Isshin looked at the metropolis on the ground and said with emotion. He looked at the cars driving below and looked at them curiously. Soul Society has never had such a thing. Captain Isshin, is this your first time in the modern world? Looking at the childlike Isshin, Dustless asked. Isshin nodded and immediately suggested, Kangzucho is quite big, why don't we split up to find that guy, it's faster. Dustless nodded and agreed, then I'll go to the east. Then I'll go to the west. Isshin jumped quickly on the high-rise buildings, his steps light and vigorous. He obviously wasn't running around aimlessly, but with a mysterious map in his hand, looking left and right to find his destination. This kid's motives are really impure, his direction seems to be, in a hidden alley. Dustless stared at Isshin in the distance with a cold smile. He had already vaguely guessed where Isshin was looking for. No wonder Urahara Kasuke was kicked out of Soul Society and knew so much inside information. I really didn't know that this kid was a spy. After thinking for a while, Dustless followed, his killing intent thickening. If Isshin knew that Dustless had embezzled a Hogyoku, he would definitely report it to the head captain. Oh whoa! At this time, a hysterical roar mixed with destructive spiritual pressure shook the sky, and the glass on both sides of the street was shattered by the powerful spiritual pressure. This spiritual pressure is not right. The footsteps suddenly sounded. Dustless frowned, keenly aware of the different spiritual pressure between Shinigami and Hollow. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A black shadow cut through the sky, surrounded by flames. It was Ishin. "Let's go and see what you can do." With a thought, Dustless followed. In short, he planned to destroy Ishin, or at least banish him forever. Just like Urahara Kasuk. Void White doesn't seem to be an opponent of Ishin Shiba. Suddenly remembering Void White's strength, Dustless couldn't help but worry. Although Void's strength was comparable to Vastolord, he was still killed by Ishin in the end. This time, I'll reluctantly help Aizen Sosuke and use Haku's hand to kill Ishin. In the alley, staring at the figure in front of him, Dustless's chakra began to surge as he focused on Ishin Shiba. Tao Breaker 90, Black Coffin. Several black shadowless blades came from all directions and almost instantly approached Ishin Shiba, who didn't know what was going on. Ishin was shocked when he saw this. Sensing the sharp auras coming from all directions, he shouted without thinking. Binding Tao number 73, Mountain Toppling Crystal. A transparent triangular defensive formation instantly appeared and protected Ishin. Even though he managed to counterattack immediately, the Tao Breaker 90's attack was still difficult to block. After a brief stalemate, the Black Coffin's attack tore through his defenses. Puchi! 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 Shiba Ishin's body was instantly torn open, and blood was dripping from his wounds. It was such a shocking wound that people couldn't bear to look at it. "Who did this? Come out for me." Enduring the unprecedented pain, Ishin unleashed his violent Ryatsu, destroying all the buildings within a radius of 100 meters, turning it into a plain visible at a glance. Even with such a heavy injury, he's still alive and kicking. His strength is probably beyond the captain level. But if you encounter Void White, you should be dead for sure. Dustless, who had already escaped, chuckled and used the Tensigan's power to clearly capture Ishin's roar, and his Ryatsu also began to rampage. Ishin's reckless release of Ryatsu will only attract Void White's attention. That's a student. When Dustless was about to watch a good show, an unexpected figure appeared in front of him. The newcomer was obviously a girl, with golden curly hair that fell to her waist like a waterfall. Her facial features were exquisite, as if they were the work of the gods. Her skin was as delicate as snow in winter. Her watery eyes were very lively, and there were obvious sweat stains on her face. What caught Dustless's attention the most was that she was holding a crystal bow in her hand. It's actually a Quincy. And what's with that face? It feels like déjà vu, strange. Dustless scratched his head. He only knew two female Quincy, one was Bambiita, and the other was Candace, but he obviously didn't know this beautiful Quincy, but he had a vague impression of her in his mind. Could it be her? After a while, a name that matched the identity of the girl Quincy appeared in his mind, Shinozaki Mikoto. Shinozaki Mikoto has the strength to fight against the captain, and she will definitely disrupt my plan if she helps Ishin. After pondering for a moment, Dustless rushed over again. Of course, it was not to help Ishin. If Void White can't kill Ishin, then Dustless will do it himself. Chapter 1057. With just a thought, the things at the end of the world were also close at hand. Under the abnormal eye power of the Tensigan, everything was right in front of him. He actually forgot about the hatred between Shinigami and Quincy. This Quincy is really compassionate. Dustless secretly observed the situation. This kind of thing has nothing to do with him, so there's no need to meddle in other people's business. He just needs to find an opportunity to kill Ishin. Roar! The violent roar came again, accompanied by violent wind and waves. The central area was like an earthquake, and the ground was shaking and cracking, and the cracks were spreading rapidly. 1 meter, 10 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters. The cracks were getting bigger and bigger, and the exaggerated range was about to annihilate the whole world. The shaking gradually became farther and farther away, and the power did not weaken, but became stronger. Under Dustless's interested gaze, a monster with a knife, a mask, and a horn on its head was exposed under the sunlight. The most surprising thing was that this monster had a void hole, but it was blocked by a mysterious substance. Finally willing to come out. But its strength is really strong. Can the two of them deal with it together? Dustless had a big question mark in his heart. There was no doubt that the power of void, the great void in Shinozaki Ichigo's body, was beyond doubt. After erupting, it killed Lord Ulquiorra with overwhelming strength. Its strength was self-evident, especially when Isshin was seriously injured by Dustless. Overall, the situation was dangerous. "Are you okay?" Looking at Isshin's horrifying wound, Shinozaki Mikoto rushed over and asked with concern. Her tone was as warm as the winter sun. "No, I'm fine, I won't die for the time being," Isshin said firmly, but his trembling body betrayed him, and his forehead was full of sweat. Seeing this, the kind-hearted Kurosaki frowned and quickly took out her handkerchief. Just as she was about to wipe the sweat off Isshin's forehead, a huge flash of light swooped down and interrupted her action. "It's Void Flash, get out of the way!" Isshin shouted loudly, and immediately stood up. His body was releasing Ryatsu, but the crack on his wound was getting bigger, and blood kept flowing. "The one who should get out of the way is you." Shinozaki Mikoto resolutely stood beside Isshin, and many arrows were condensed from her fingers, aiming at the incoming flash. This little girl, Dustless, who was in the dark, looked at Shinozaki Mikoto with shining eyes. From the fluctuations of Ryatsu and the skillful movements of the Quincy, she was definitely not weaker than Bambieta and Candace. By Shinozaki Mikoto. Whoosh! A few divine arrows that were compressed by the spiritual particles were shot out. They rose from the ground and came into close contact with the falling flash. Boom! The power of the two moves was roughly equal, and they cancelled each other out after the big explosion. Very. Isshin Shibuya gave a thumbs up. Although the creature in front of him couldn't speak and could only growl, it was definitely not weaker than Lord. Shinozaki's hers SSSS puff. At this moment, Shinozaki Mikoto suddenly spat out blood. Her face was pale, and her body was on the verge of collapsing. Looking closely, a bloody mark appeared on her right shoulder. How surprising. This void is so cunning, Dustless was stunned. Others may not have seen the scene just now, but he saw it clearly. When the explosion occurred, a small red flash was spat out from Void's mouth. It was extremely fast, 20 times faster than an ordinary Void flash, but its power was greatly reduced. Using a Void egg to hit Shinozaki Mikoto in the chaos. How cunning. Dustless sincerely admired Shinozaki Mikoto. However, the next scene made Shinozaki Mikoto, Isshin, and Dustless all petrified. How is it possible? This thing is just something made by Sosuke Aizen. How can it use that? He's not a Shinigami. Although it's a void made by a large number of Shinigami's souls, it doesn't make sense for him to know Kido. And from the fluctuations of his Ryatsu, it's a high-level Heido. Dustless's heart was in turmoil. He didn't expect Void to know Heido. He had never heard of Shinozaki Ichigo before. Tsubai raised his right arm that was holding the bone broadsword, and a thick flash of light spread out. Even though White Void couldn't speak, Dustless still heard these words, Tao Breaker 88, Flying Dragon Strikes Thief Sky Shaking Thunder Cannon. Shinozaki Mikoto and Isshin were injured, and they were like fish on the chopping board. They could only watch as the light engulfed them, and their hearts were filled with despair. Am I going to die? Damn it. Shinozaki Mikoto raised a bitter smile and mocked herself. Her pretty face was full of unwillingness. No one wanted to die. Just when she had completely given up, a figure resolutely blocked in front of her. The thin figure was not worth mentioning under the light of destruction. The thin figure was unusually firm, and his eyes were indifferent. His pupils were calm and expressionless, as if he was looking at an insect. His eyes were full of unbearable bullying. Captain Dustless. Ishin was surprised, and the despair in her heart was immediately swept away. Captain. Shinozaki Mako's eyes widened when she heard that. She couldn't believe that the skinny man in front of her, whose skin was even smoother than hers, was actually a captain. Shinozaki Mako even suspected that Wuchen was shorter than her. But he was a captain. Dustless then raised his thin right arm under Shinozaki Makoto's incredulous gaze. You want to kill with a mere candlelight? Naive. The intimate pair of eyes suddenly widened. At the moment when the light beam fell, Wuchen's right arm swept out, and the world that could destroy was easily shattered. The sky cleared up again. Chapter 1058. Shinozaki Makoto looked at the light that shattered in an instant with a shocked expression. That thick light beam was extremely fragile in front of Dustless, not even worth mentioning. Dustless raised his hand and scattered it. This guy can actually use Shinigami's Heido. Even Arcana Breaker can't do this. Looking at the palm of his right hand, Dustless felt that strange touch just now. He was sure that it was definitely Heido, not a violent attack like Void Flash. A whoa, as if provoked, Void, who was floating in the sky, let out a terrifying roar. His ferocious eyes stared at Dustless with murderous intent. Dustless, Shinozaki Makoto, and Ishin all felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Be careful, he's very powerful, not an ordinary Minos Grande. Seeing that Dustless was indifferent, neither attacking nor defending, Shinozaki Makoto solemnly reminded. Powerful? Maybe. Looking back leisurely, Dustless stared at Shinozaki Makoto's bloody shoulder. His eyes flashed with ridicule as he turned his head and shouted, "Come at me. Beast!" Hearing this, Shinozaki Makoto's expression changed greatly. She was so depressed that she almost vomited blood. Her words were to tell Dustless not to provoke Void, and not to call him a beast. You actually dared to provoke him on purpose. He's a conscious Minos Grande, not an ordinary one. Shinozaki Makoto said cautiously. She was sweating profusely and was very nervous. What are you afraid of? Looking at Shinozaki Makoto's eyes, Dustless said faintly, Do you think you can live if you don't provoke him? You're too naive, woman. You don't understand Void. It's impossible to be set free. This guy was sent to kill people. It's the same whether I provoke him or not. No matter what happens in the end, it's a dead end. Dustless said bluntly. Shinozaki Makoto was confused and didn't understand what he meant. He's coming. Seeing that white void had disappeared, Ishin looked around and said in a deep voice, This guy is very unusual. He is very strong and his Ryatsu is also very strong. Especially his speed, bang, bang, bang. Ishin Shiba's voice hasn't fallen yet. He saw Wuchen casually kick out, and a body suddenly flew out. Caw caw caw, white void was sent flying by Dustless's kick. The powerful force caused him to smash through several buildings, and he fell into the ruins in a sorry state. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. How is that possible? So fast. Shinozaki Makoto exclaimed in shock. She didn't even see the entire process clearly. She only saw Wuchen casually kick White Void, causing him to suffer a heavy blow. His body was sent flying 100 meters away. They even took away a few buildings. Death God, let go of Jinho, or I'll kill your companion as well. A cold warning sounded out from the left as a silhouette walked out from the darkness. That person wore spectacles with killing intent in his eyes as he looked at the injured Kurosaki with a sinister expression. Ishida Ryuzo. Ripples appeared in Dustless's calm eyes as he recognized the person in an instant. He was Ishida Yulong's father. Oh, right. No wonder you came out to look for Kurosaki Mikoto. She is now the daughter-in-law of the Ishida family. Dustless's eyes gradually regained their clarity. He glanced at Ishida Ryuzo and ignored him. He had nothing good to say to this cold guy. This guy, how dare he ignore me, damn it. Ishida Ryushin's face was filled with murderous intent. He flicked his wrist and formed a shining longbow. The arrow that was surrounded by cold air was aimed at Wuchin. Xiaolong, you misunderstood. Without his help, I would have been dead. Kurosaki Mikoto explained to Ishida Ryuzo. At the same time, she lifted her finger and pointed at the ruins in front of them. She said in a serious tone, I sensed an unusual greater void and rushed over. But I didn't expect to be ambushed by him. Kurosaki Mikoto smiled bitterly. Her tone was filled with unwillingness. If it wasn't for him, I would have stepped into heaven. Ishida Ryuzo did not listen to her. He continued to aim at Dustless and said, the Grim Reapers are all cunning. Don't be fooled by them. Also, after sorting out his thoughts, Ishida Ryuzo continued, the Grim Reapers are all, you have been talking for a long time. I have always wanted to ask you a question. Without waiting for Ishida Ryuzo to finish his sentence, Dustless cut him off and said coldly, your existence is unnecessary. There is no stage for you here. Leave now. I don't want to see your face. Dustless glanced at Ishida Ryuzo and said calmly, don't force my hand. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. A sharp sound pierced through the air. Ishida Ryuzo raised his head and shot out all the photon arrows in his hand. The number of photon arrows was dense and vicious. In an instant, Dustless was destroyed. Hundreds of holes appeared on his body. It was a tragic sight. Humph, your strength is average, but your mouth is quite good at bragging. Seeing this, Ishida Ryuzo snorted in disdain. He then took a step forward. However, before his foot could touch the ground, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky and suppressed Ishida Ryuzo. Boom boom boom. The ground shook and a circular crater appeared. Flashes of light gathered and condensed into Dustless's body. His indifferent eyes looked down at Ishida Ryuzo. Dustless's right foot stepped on his face mercilessly. I said before that I don't like to see your face. Since you don't know what's good for you, I can only melt this disgusting face. As soon as his voice fell, a large golden light swept out from Dustless's feet. The temperature was so high that even steel could be easily melted. Chapter 1059. Ishida Ryuzo was shocked. He felt the aura of death that he had never felt before. The high-density light did not even touch him, but he felt like he was going to melt like water. Ishida Ryuzo was sure that if he were to take Dustless's attack in his current state, he would definitely die. Don't touch him, he's one of us. Shinozaki Mako's beautiful eyes widened with anxiety. Although she was disgusted by the marriage arranged by the Ishida family, she couldn't just watch Ishida Ryuzo get killed. After all, she owed the Ishida family a debt of gratitude. One of us. Dustless turned to look at Shinozaki and sneered. He took the initiative to attack me with the Holy Annihilation Arrow. One of us attacking one of us. That's rare. Shinozaki Jinko was stunned when he heard this. He lowered his head silently in surprise. He knows the skill of Quincy. This time, it was Shinozaki's turn to be shocked. She looked at the shining leg that was approaching Ishida Ryuzo and quickly said, that's a misunderstanding, he's fine. Naive, Dustless glanced at Shinozaki indifferently and said, before coming to the modern world, the head captain said that if you encounter a Quincy sneak attack, there is no need to show mercy. Kill without mercy. This kid is the one who started it. Do you think I need to show mercy? Shinozaki, even if you don't understand the grudge between the Shinigami and Quincy, you should have heard of it. Ishin nodded. First of all, Shinigami and Quincy were hostile forces. Although he felt sorry for Shinozaki Makino, Ishida Ryuzu was the one who attacked first. He deserved to be killed. His hands were in Ishida Ryuzu's hands. No one forced him to do it. But Shinozaki's expression froze. She moved her lips but closed them again. She looked very helpless. "You're going to suffer if you're so kind." Dustless's voice was unusually light. In short, there was more vitality in it. He said, "Besides, do you think this arrogant kid will appreciate it?" The answer is no. Not only will he not, but he will also feel humiliated. For a man to be protected by a woman, this may be worse than killing him. Dustless's words were as sharp as a knife, piercing Ishida Ryuzu's self-esteem. His face, which could be considered handsome, suddenly became extremely distorted. "I hate people like you the most. Others saved you, but you don't appreciate it. You even put on an expression of, 'I'm very capable and don't need you to meddle in other people's business.' Actually, you're just a piece of trash." With a cold expression, Dustless's right leg landed on Ishida Ryuzu's face. Boom, boom, boom. A violent explosion resounded through the sky, and a wave of destructive force spread out. Steel was melted, buildings were erased, and even the invisible air was burned to the point of boiling. The temperature had increased by dozens of times. "Oh. I underestimated you. I almost forgot, you are also a Quincy." The ground that Dustless and Ishida Ryukshin were standing on had been charred black, but Ishida Ryukshin had managed to escape the calamity. "It's you who underestimated me. I'm a pure-blooded Quincy, don't underestimate me." In the smoke, Ishida Ryuzu's arrogant voice could be heard. Following that, he was covered in all sorts of unruly patterns, and his skin had become as hard as a meteorite. Blood tranquilizer. Luckily, he's fine. Seeing this, Shinozaki Mikoto heaved a sigh of relief. The rock that was hanging in front of his chest had also landed safely. Staring at Ishida Ryuzu's face, Shinozaki Mikoto earnestly advised, "Little Long, you should leave this place first. There's no need for you to get involved in this mess. You are the only child of the Ishida family." Pfft. The smoke dispersed, revealing Ishida Ryuzu's face. Shinozaki Mikoto was dumbfounded, and could not help but laugh out loud. "This guy. I'm dying of laughter." Ishida Shiba also looked at Ishida Ryuzu's disfigured face, and laughed until he rolled on the ground. "You bastard, I'll tear you into pieces and burn your bones to ashes." Seeing this, Ishida Ryuzu was stunned. He then used Erasure to condense a mirror, and looked at his face. His entire body turned red. "Aw. There's no need to be so angry, right? At least I spared your life." Dustless shrugged helplessly. His eyes were filled with resentment, as if he was saying that Ishida Ryuzu should be thanking him. Looking closely, Ishida Ryuzu's handsome face was disfigured, and there was a huge footprint on it. It was like a branding iron, forever imprinted on Ishida Ryuzu's face. "You should be thanking me. If you walk on the streets like this, I guarantee that you'll turn heads 100%. Dustless teased. His tone was filled with schadenfreude. He hated people like Ishida Ryuzu the most. Others were kind enough to save you, but you didn't appreciate it and insisted on keeping up appearances. If that was the case, then you should live a pitiful life. You bastard, you must have done it on purpose." Ishida Ryuzu glared at him, and his lungs were about to explode. A huge footprint almost covered his entire face. How was he going to face others in the future? "You're right, I did it on purpose. But so what?" Dustless said uninterestedly, and yawned. With a sleepy expression, it was obvious that he did not put Ishida Ryuzu in his eyes. "Aren't you the father of the second male lead? I'm going to hit you. If you're not happy, come and bite me. Chapter 1060. Ishida Ryukshin's entire body trembled and his face turned ashen. Killing someone was just a matter of nodding his head to the ground. What Wuchen did was far worse than cutting him into 1,000 pieces. As a pure-blooded Quincy, Ishida Ryukshin thought highly of himself. Of course, it was undeniable that he had the capital to be superior. In this world, Quincy were very rare, and pure-blooded ones were even rarer. However, it was okay to be arrogant, but it depended on who the opponent was. To have a disdainful attitude towards someone who was stronger than you was courting death. If I just kill you, it would be too easy for you. I think it's more interesting to let you live in humiliation. Dustless ignored Ishida Ryukshin's eyes that wanted to peel his skin and break his bones. Boom boom boom. A violent hurricane swept from the distance, and the earth shook. Everyone felt like there was a mountain on their back, and they couldn't move an inch. Not only did he not die, he became stronger. What kind of monster did Sosuke Aizen create? Frowning, Dustless felt the surging waves of Ryatsu. He was very surprised, and he had a clearer understanding of Empyrean's strength. Then the sky turned dark red. A huge flash of light condensed above Empyrean's head, distorting space and time, like a whirlpool in the deep sea, swallowing the entire sky, and a red halo covered the sky. Gulp. Under this apocalyptic flash, everyone's expression changed greatly. Only Dustless could remain calm. Ishida Isshin and Ishida Ryukshin were seriously injured. They were already lucky that they didn't die from Dustless's sneak attack, and then they fought with Empyrean, and they were almost exhausted. As for Ishida Ryukshin, his handsome face was kicked by Dustless, and a domineering footprint was left on his face. I must take revenge. Ishida Ryukshin touched his face and said while gritting his teeth. Ao ao ao. At this time, a strange roar shook the sky, and it was even more terrifying than Empyrean. You, what are you doing? What are you doing? Get out of the way. Don't come near me. Suddenly, a panicked cry came. Dustless froze and subconsciously looked at Isshin. Shiba Isshin's mouth emitted a milky white spiritual pressure that covered his face like a mask. His spiritual pressure became different as he roared, which was similar to Subai's. This is voidification. This kid has been corroded by the power of the great illusionary realm. A glint of surprise flashed across Dustless's eyes as he exclaimed in shock. Only then did he remember that in the previous battle, Isshin Shiba was injured by Void, and 80% of Void's power had invaded his body. Damn it, how am I supposed to explain this to the head captain? Dustless had a headache. Before coming here, Old Man Yamamoto had told the two of them to take care of each other. Now that Isshin Shiba was inexplicably eroded by the power of the greater void, it was inevitable that he would be scolded. Get out of my way! Shinozaki Makino screamed in fear. Shiba Isshin was approaching her with saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. You bastard, get away from Janine. Flying scythe kick. Ishida Ryukshin roared and channeled all the spiritual particles in his body towards Shiba Isshin. Shiba Isshin, who was completely consumed by the great illusionary realm, had an arrogant smile on his face as he opened his mouth and shot out a fiery red light. Boom boom boom. The destructive light easily blew away Ishida Ryukshin like a kite with a broken string. Bang bang bang. A few hundred meters away, Ishida Ryukshin was lying on the ground with his body charred. He was gasping for breath, and his heartbeat and breathing were very weak. It looked like he was about to stop. Monsters are gathering. Seeing this, Dustless sighed. Then, he turned into a photon and rushed towards Isshin at the speed of light. Get out of my way. Shinozaki Makino looked at Isshin in fear. Her soul was trembling as she was forced to a corner. Isshin was also approaching her with his teeth bared. Isshin was covered in milky white spiritual pressure. Under Shinozaki Makino's desperate gaze, he raised his sharp nails and stabbed towards her. If you're dematerialized. Even if you're my colleague, I can't let you go. I'm sorry, Captain Isshin. Shinozaki Makino's hopeless eyes were filled with hope. Dustless stood in front of her with a sinister smile, and a thick beam of light condensed on his fingers. Laser. The flash of light poured out and hit Isshin Shiba without any accident. Boom boom boom. The moment the light touched Isshin, it exploded. The scorching heat engulfed him, and the milky white spiritual pressure on his skin was melted. Hee hee. God is kind to me. Why should I save you? I can use this opportunity to kill you. You bastard, you're a traitor. You flirted with Urahara Kasuke and Sifing Quartz Yi. This is retribution. Dustless laughed. Since Isshin was already dematerialized, killing him would be an official matter. The head captain would not say anything. He could also use this opportunity to reap the rewards. Killing two birds with one stone. Pour all the dirty water on Isshin's head, make him the scapegoat, and kick him out of Soul Society. Roar roar roar, as if they had a tacit understanding, White Void also suddenly attacked from the side, opening his bloody mouth to bite at Yishiwin. The winner of this game has been decided. There's no need for you to exist. He turned his head and glanced at White Void. Suddenly, the space around him flashed with black light. It was tens of thousands of times sharper than a blade. Without exception, all of them were pointed at White Void. Dustless spat out a cold breath and ended White Void's life instantly. 90 Black Coffin of Hado. Pucci. 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 Countless rays of black light swarmed over, instantly crushing the body of Ethereal White. Chapter 1061. Number 90's Hado cut through the void. His entire body was covered with scars, and his body was on the verge of collapsing. He was bleeding profusely, and the blood vessels in his body could not be stopped. Ow ow ow, all beasts were ferocious, and the void was no exception. He was originally a greater void, and was naturally easily angered. Being severely injured by Dustless did not suppress his bloodthirst. Instead, he was completely enraged. Roar, the heart-wrenching roar of anger spread, deafening everyone. Their brains were not listening to their commands, and the only thing they could think of was the void's roar. After all, it was created. The nature of the beast did not change. Dustless was unfazed by the roar that was filled with endless killing intent and hatred. The difference between them was too great, and there was no comparison at all. They were not even of the same origin. In Dustless's eyes, it was just the unhappiness of a child who was beaten to tears. Caw caw caw. The surrounding void shattered like a mirror, and there was a series of cracking sounds. The sky was swallowed by the red demonic light, and the places that were affected by the light were filled with dead silence. What kind of monster is this guy? He knows Void Flash, and he seems to know the Ghost Dao ability of the Grim Reaper. Shinozaki Makoto swallowed his saliva and said in disbelief. He was so shocked that his entire body was trembling slightly. Dustless turned his head and glanced at Shinozaki Makoto. Disappointment flashed through his eyes, and he sighed to himself. What a pity. Her body was also infiltrated by the void's power. She will die soon. Dustless sighed to himself. A pure-blooded Quincy was extremely rare, and there were not many of them in the world. Most of them were Habaku's lackeys. You are also a tragedy. Dustless suddenly said after a while. What do you mean? Shinozaki Makoto's expression changed slightly. He could sense that Dustless was implying something else. Boom boom boom. At the same time, the void flash that Void White painstakingly created was completed. It turned into a void flash that was the size of a human's head, and the power it emitted was enough to destroy the world. What a terrifying void flash! Feeling the power of void flash, Shinozaki Mako said in fear. He instinctively shrunk his neck and stared at the giant void flash in the sky. Fear flashed in his beautiful eyes. In the end, she's still a woman. No, in the end, she's still just a student. Dustless calmly said as he stared at Shinozaki in her student uniform. It was normal for him to be afraid. After all, this was the first time he had met such an invincible Great Void Realm expert, and he even had the ability to control the Grim Reaper. Dustless focused his gaze on the expanding void flash. A murderous grin appeared on his face. In order for you to disappear without a trace, show me some of your true abilities. As soon as Dustless finished his words, a strange black sphere appeared behind him. It was the size of a fist and looked harmless. It was impossible for it to kill the enemy, but Shinozaki's body instinctively moved back. This, Shinozaki Makino was shocked as he stared at the mysterious bead in a daze. Suddenly, he realized that his body was no longer listening to him and instinctively wanted to avoid it. Just disappear forever. Dustless glanced at Void Flash coldly. Under his command, the truth-seeking ball floating behind him flew out. Roar! White Void also clearly sensed the black sphere, but he quickly gave it a look of disdain, even treating it as air. He did not feel any spiritual pressure fluctuations. It did not seem to have any destructive power, so he continued to focus on transferring spiritual pressure to Void Flash. Is it really going to work? Shinozaki Makino's face was filled with doubt. Under Void Flash's indifferent gaze, the truth-seeking ball came into contact with his body. Crack, 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 crack. Void Flash was as hard as a meteorite. Even number 90 Tao Breaker, Black Coffin, could not shatter it. His entire body started to collapse. The process was extremely strange. There were no wounds on his body, but he just disappeared mysteriously. His legs, abdomen, arms, head, all of them collapsed one by one. Roar! Void Flash roared unwillingly. His mouth full of sharp teeth spat out cold air as he stared at Dustless. Madness flashed in his eyes. Void Flash condensed on the horns on his forehead was thrown out with all of his strength. Even in death, you want to drag me down with you. This is very similar to Aizen's style. Staring at the incoming flash, Dustless was as calm as a breeze. The truth-seeking ball appeared behind him again. It was not proportional to the huge flash of light, but Kurosaki's face was full of relief. With the previous lesson, her heart also relaxed. As expected, the moment Void Flash came into contact with the truth-seeking ball, it collapsed on its own. The haze that shrouded the world also disappeared, and everything returned to normal. It's finally over. Seeing this, Shinozaki Makino breathed a sigh of relief. She immediately tried to stand up, but a black shadow covered her. Miss Shinozaki, you are also injured. Soon, you will be eroded by the power of the greater void and die. Dustless walked over and said lazily. Shiba Ishin was lying on the ground far away. The mask on her body was gradually collapsing. It was obvious that she was fighting against the power of the void in her body. I know. The power of the void is a fatal poison to the Quincy. Shinozaki Makino's beautiful eyes were dim. Her beautiful face was filled with loneliness as she said helplessly. I told you. No living creature wants to die. Dustless's lips curled into a faint smile. He continued, Miss Shinozaki, I can guarantee that you will be safe. Even if the power of the void destroys the dormitory, it will be fine. But, we have to make a deal. Only then can I help you out of this crisis. Shinozaki Makino frowned. She looked at Dustless's eyes. After hesitating for a while, she said, "Let's hear it." Chapter 1062. Shinozaki was curious about Dustless's true thoughts. She couldn't understand how a dying person like her could be of any use to Dustless. She might not even be of any use to him. Dustless closed his eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. His brows were tightly knitted. "Am I of any value to you?" Shinozaki asked curiously as she stared at Dustless's thoughtful face. She was just a dying person. She didn't think that she was of any value to be used or valued. Of course. Dustless grinned and revealed a mysterious smile. Even the most insignificant chess piece can explode with the most destructive power if used properly. Not to mention, you're very important. Shinozaki's face was blank. She didn't think that she was of much use. She was just a dying person. "Do you know who your ancestor is?" Dustless suddenly changed the topic and asked. "Ancestor?" Shinozaki made a distressed expression and bitterly smiled. "I really don't know who the ancestor of the Shinozaki family is." Dustless shook his head and said directly, "I'm talking about Yawatch." Shinozaki thought for a long time before answering. "Yawatch? I think there was such a person. I heard that he was the ancestor of all Quincy, but I heard that he died many years ago. It's good that you know Yawatch." Dustless wiped the sweat off his temples. He was afraid that Shinozaki was an ignorant person and had to start from the beginning. And then? "Don't tell me that Yawatch came back from the dead." Shinozaki blinked her gem-like eyes and said playfully. "Why do you think he's dead?" Dustless glanced at Yawatch with a deep gaze and asked instead of answering. "You have to understand that Yawatch is the god of all Quincy. Even if he's immortal, god. He's not worthy. He's just a butcher." Dustless was planning to brag about Yuhabok and then scold him. Who would have thought that Shinozaki Manori would rudely interrupt him? Could it be, thinking of a possibility, Dustless asked tentatively, "Was your ancestor killed by Yawatch?" Although it was just Dustless's guess, it was highly likely because the hometowns of Busby and Jugram were both conquered by Yawatch and eliminated by Yawatch. And such examples could be found everywhere. "Well, I'm not too sure about the specifics. All I know is that Yawatch isn't a good person. The elders in my family once said that Quincy's decline was caused by Yawatch. It was all to satisfy his selfish desires," Shinozaki Makoto explained. His tone was filled with hatred. "Idiot, that's because your Abyss annihilation was too stupid. You drank Yawatch's blood and deserved to be killed. You will all become nourishment for the saints in the future." Dustless complained in his mind. Those who wanted to quickly increase their strength would accept the gift of Yawatch, which was his own blood. Therefore, during the parting, it would be the nourishment for Yawatch to become stronger. In addition, the souls of those with impure blood would also belong to Yawatch after death. "We've been talking for a long time. What do you want from me?" Shinozaki Makoto reminded Dustless when he saw that Dustless was getting further and further away from the topic. Seeing that Shinozaki Makoto was angered by Yawatch, Dustless said, "I'm sorry to tell you that Yawatch is not dead. It's just sealed. Other than that, the impure blood of Quincy is the nourishment for Yawatch's resurrection. You weren't one of them in the past. Now, your blood has been integrated with the power of the void, and your blood is no longer pure. This means that you are also one of the nourishments for Yawatch's resurrection." The biggest reason why Shinozaki Makoto would fall in the future was because of Yawatch. "Impossible. How do you know all this?" Shinozaki Makoto denied it immediately. "Besides, I've never drunk Yawatch's blood. How can I be its nourishment?" Dustless glanced at the flustered Shinozaki Makoto and said coldly, "You haven't drunk Yawatch's blood, but what about your ancestor? Don't forget that Yawatch is the ancestor of all Quincy." Shinozaki Mikoto was speechless. He wanted to refute, but he couldn't find a reason. What do you want? After a while, Shinozaki Mikoto fixed his gaze on Dustless and said, if what you said is true, it's useless even if you save me. My blood is no longer pure. In the future, Yawatch will still take away my power. Your death is a foregone conclusion. There are some things that I can't change. Dustless looked at Shinozaki Mikoto with a complicated expression. Although he was powerful, he wasn't omnipotent. He caught the unwillingness in Shinozaki Mikoto's eyes and said, are you willing to be killed by Yawatch? In fact, I can help you take revenge. Shinozaki Mikoto was very doubtful. Really? Yawatch used to be the king of Quincy. Its strength must be shocking. Of course. Dustless smiled strangely and moved closer to Shinozaki Mikoto. He said darkly, the so-called saint is actually just extracting your soul. I can implant something special in your soul in advance. I'll make that bastard Yawatch suffer so much that he'll wish he was dead. It'll be revenge for you. What do you think, Miss Shinozaki? Shinozaki Mikoto was silent. Hesitation was evident in his eyes. Dustless wasn't surprised to see Shinozaki Mikoto hesitate. He said, the great void in your body will soon devour your entire body. You'll die in a few hours. However, I can use my ability to help you suppress the great void and let you live for a few more years. In return, you have to let me implant a spell in your soul to give that bastard Yawatch a surprise. Chapter 1063. Shingo Kurosaki was instantly speechless. He didn't know what to say, but he felt that it was awesome. Previously, Wu-chen was still trying to talk to her and was very polite. Now that he suddenly called her an old bastard, she didn't come back to her senses for a moment. She had a feeling that she was in the clouds, as if everything that Wu-chen did before was just a disguise. What's your choice? Although you may die in the future, you will at least live for a few more years. Wu-chen asked. He was sure that Shinozaki Manori would agree. Although this woman was very gentle and her smile was as warm as the sun, there was another side to her personality. She was very strong, but she wouldn't compromise with the curse of fate. Even if she knew that it was a struggle before death, she would never give up. I promise you. Shinozaki replied resolutely. Her fragile appearance was replaced by strength. That's for the best. Dustless gently nodded. Just as he was about to pull Shinozaki away, the remaining restless spiritual pressure in the atmosphere strangely quieted down, and Dustless's footsteps also stopped. What a surprise, you actually suppressed the great void in your body. Dustless's gaze fell on Ishin as he nodded with a hint of appreciation in his tone. At the same time, he looked at Shinozaki beside him with a strange feeling in his heart. Because of Dustless's intervention, Shinozaki and Ishin were like strangers. Now, it seems that the probability of them becoming husband and wife in the future was reduced to 0. What were you talking about? Who is Yawatch? Ishin, who had just woken up, asked. When he was fighting against the great void in his body, he faintly heard a lot of unknown information. Moreover, what the two said was reasonable, and it was obviously not nonsense. You heard it all. Dustless was stunned for a moment before he asked indifferently, his face was covered with frost. The Great Void's recovery ability is really amazing. Shinozaki has returned to normal in such a short time, and his body is intact. The original sword wound is also healed. Dustless secretly nodded, and the way he looked at Ishin changed. The hunter looked at his prey with sharp and threatening eyes. What do you plan to do? Coming closer to Dustless, Kurosaki Manori spoke in a voice that only the two of them could hear. What if he leaks the news? Speaking up to hear, Shinozaki closed his mouth and waited for Dustless's reply. Hearing this, Dustless's lips curled into a faint smile. His expression was frivolous as he said, "Don't worry, there is a type of person in this world who will never speak. Only the dead would be speechless forever." Shinozaki Mikoto was intelligent, so he naturally knew what Dustless was trying to do. However, he suddenly regretted it. Looking at Dustless's gloomy face, he felt as if he was asking a tiger for its skin. He felt that if Yawatch was a jackal, the young man in front of him was a ferocious tiger. "Captain, what do you think about the modern world?" After a while, Dustless suddenly closed his eyes and asked. Hearing this, Ishin was stunned. He subconsciously looked around and said, "Although it's not as exquisite as Soul Society, it still has its own unique flavor. My first impression of it is pretty good." Wuchen shook his head. The light on his right arm floated and condensed into a golden sword. He said coldly, "Captain Shiba, you misunderstood me. I mean, what will happen if the modern world becomes a graveyard?" Graveyard? Hearing this, Ishin was puzzled. He looked at Dustless and saw that his face was dark and murderous. In a trance, Ishin saw an unprecedented beast. It opened its bloody mouth and bared its fangs at him. "Captain Dustless, what do you mean?" Ishin, who felt that something was wrong, was secretly on guard. Looking at Dustless, who was emitting murderous aura, his right hand was already holding the hilt of his zanpakuto. "No wonder you were plotted against by Aizen Sosuke, your brain is really slow." "Captain, I said this. I mean to destroy you, because you heard something you shouldn't have heard," Dustless said casually. Ishin's expression changed, and he immediately took the fiercest reaction. Bakudo number 61, Rokudo Light Prison. 6 huge golden light ribbons attacked from all directions, subduing the sloppy Dustless in an instant. Not only Wuchen, but Shinozaki Mako who was beside him also received the same treatment. He was restrained by 6 huge light ribbons and was unable to move. "Capture you and send you to Soul Society for the head captain to deal with," Ishin said sternly. However, as soon as his voice fell, a burst of fragmented sound made Ishin's expression stiff, completely replaced by astonishment. Wu Che just raised his foot and moved slightly, and the bakudo that bound him instantly disappeared. He calmly looked at Ishin. Bakudo number 61, Rokudo Light Prison. At the same time, 6 huge rays of light came from all directions, instantly blocking Ishin's escape route and binding him to the heavy armor. Kakaka, seeing this, Ishin's body swayed left and right, and after a while, he couldn't help but blush. He tried to destroy it in the same way as Dustless, but it was futile. The effect was negligible. Puchi. In desperation, Ishin could only use his sword to destroy the Rokudo Light Prison and break free from it. He looked around and hurriedly looked for Dustless, but he was surprised to find that Dustless was nowhere to be seen, and his Ryatsu was completely gone. Puchi. A cold light came from behind and penetrated Ishin's body. He suddenly turned around and saw Dustless. Of course, there was also the golden sword in his hand, which almost instantly injured Ishin, and the golden sword pierced his heart. "The gap between you and me is like the gap between Vasto Lord and Gilliam." Chapter 1064. Ishin looked at the golden sword in disbelief. Because of the high temperature, he felt an unprecedented stinging pain. His face suddenly became pale and extremely haggard. How is this possible? Did he come from the sky? Ishin was shocked, he couldn't figure out where Dustless came from. He looked around but couldn't find any trace. As expected of the captain, you are really talented. But unfortunately, you are my enemy, and you heard something you shouldn't have heard. Don't think that you will be safe, you will have to pay the price. Dustless chuckled, he jumped out using the heavenly hand, so Ishin couldn't understand it. Whoosh! A cold light swept across, piercing Dustless's eyes. He looked up and saw Ishin waving his zanpakuto at Dustless in a very tricky way. Funny, seeing this, Dustless didn't dodge, he raised his thin right arm and grabbed it. It seemed that he wanted to catch Ishin's attack with his bare hands. You are courting death. Seeing how arrogant Wuchen was, Ishin's murderous aura surged. His black pupils were filled with murderous aura, and his strength was several times stronger than before. Your hatred for me is quite deep. Dustless smiled, his right arm was still grabbing the Zanpakuto. Clang! A roar of steel resounded, and the head was not separated from the body as expected. The whole hand turned into 5 black fingers and easily caught the incoming Zanpakuto. You caught my Zanpakuto with your bare hands. Ishin exclaimed in disbelief while enduring the pain all over his body. It was as if he was in a dream, everything that happened in front of him was illusory. As I said before, the gap between you and me is the gap between Vasto Lord and Killian. It was just a boring one-sided crush. Do you think you can be on par with me? Don't joke around. We're not 2 or 3 years old kids. Don't have such unrealistic thoughts in the future. The chakra in his body surged, and his eyes rapidly twisted. Ripples gushed out from his purple eyes, easily forcing Ishin to retreat. Shinra Tensei. The repulsive force easily sent Shiba Ishin flying, forcing him to retreat again and again, cutting a sorry figure. So. Dustless took a step forward and appeared next to Ishin Shiba in an instant. He chased after him and attacked him. The Kusanagi sword in his hand shone brightly. Clang, clang, clang. The sparks from the clash of swords and sabers were particularly dazzling, and the frequency was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the two had clashed dozens of times, but the situation was almost one-sided. Ishin was forced back by Dustless, and the wounds on his body were getting more and more, and he was bleeding non-stop. Puchi! Dustless aimed his Kusanagi sword at Shiba Ishin's right shoulder. Shiba Ishin's right arm was cut open, and his right arm that was holding the Zanpakuto trembled. His Zanpakuto almost fell to the ground. Light speed kick. Taking advantage of this, a straight flash of light whizzed out. The momentum was fierce, and it was like a golden spear that was unstoppable. Ishin wanted to dodge, but at this moment, he was already covered in wounds. Although they weren't fatal, the number of wounds greatly limited his speed. He was inevitably hit by the flash of light. Boom boom boom. The earth trembled, and Ishin, who was covered in black smoke, was sent flying. His body was severely burned, and his face was unrecognizable. Is this the end? Glancing at Ishin, Dustless said uninterestedly. When he was about to finish him off with his Zanpakuto, Ishin stood up again. Shinozaki Ichigo in the future must be inherited. Seeing this scene, Dustless was interested again. He was about to test how long Ishin could last, but his body strangely emitted a black mist. The spiritual pressure disappeared. What's going on? Dustless was surprised, and he suddenly realized that he couldn't feel Ishin's spiritual pressure. It was as if it suddenly disappeared into thin air, and he couldn't detect it at all. No wonder he woke up and was willing to come back to the shore. Dustless guessed and immediately shook his head. Ishin was a stubborn person, and it was impossible for him to give up, so there was only one possibility. He had evolved to a higher dimension than Dustless. Could it be Moonless? Although it was just Wu Chen's personal guess, he said with certainty. That's right. So far, there were only 2 people who had truly released Moonless. One was Shinozaki Ichigo, and the other was his father, Ishin. Get out of the way, something is wrong with this guy. She was counting on Dustless to save her life. If Dustless died first, she would die with him. And Ishin Shiba in front of him was obviously not right. There was a mysterious black mist floating around his body, and so was his Zanpakuto. Especially his deep eyes, they were dead silent, as if they could see through people's hearts, full of oppression. This is my strongest move. Ishin said with a hoarse voice, "After using this move, I will completely lose the power of the Shinigami, and it is also my last move to end you." Hearing this, Dustless looked at Ishin sadly and said lazily, "It is indeed a very strong move, but it can only end you, it can't end me." "It's also impossible, you're just asking for it, Captain." Dustless looked at Ishin calmly. "It's just moonless, there's no need to worry." Chapter 1065. Ishin Shiba's Zanpakuto was nowhere to be seen. The blade in his hand was completely made up of mysterious black mist. There was no blade, no cut, and no pressure. Everything looked normal at first glance. Other than the fact that he couldn't sense Shinozaki Ishin's Ryatsu, everything else was normal. Only Dustless felt the threat of death. "Bring it on, Ishin Shiba." Dustless wasn't surprised that Ishin Shiba knew how to use Moonless. After all, he was the one who taught Shinozaki Ichigo how to use Moonless. It was only natural that Moonless would be used as well. This father and son had many similar techniques. Although the state in front of him was similar to Moonless, there was a fundamental difference. They were two different techniques, but they were similar to Shinozaki Ichigo's Moonless. Dustless cleaned the dust on his clothes and said helplessly, "So strong. My clothes are stained with so much dust. Is this guy not afraid of death? He can still remain calm in the face of such a powerful and dangerous technique, and he's even provoking that Shinigami called Ishin Shiba." He was completely different from Dustless. Shinozaki, who was watching in the dark, cursed Ishin Shiba for seeking death. Ishin Shiba didn't make any excessive moves. However, his face was covered in frost, and the invisible blade in his hand grew larger and larger. "Go to hell and repent." As soon as his voice fell, Ishin raised his black blade and swept out. A huge chop was like a hot knife through butter. The ground was easily torn apart like a piece of paper. The black light that wanted to destroy everything could condense time and space. The world was solemn, and only the crisp sound of cracking could be heard. The earth was completely destroyed by Moonless. The only thing that could be heard was the sound of destruction. "I thought it would be a powerful technique. I was looking forward to it, but it's just this." Glancing at the incoming black light, Wuchen regained his composure. He waved his big hand, and a dazzling brilliance swept out from the void behind him. A strange spiral weapon emerged from it. The moment the strange sword appeared, it emitted a demonic red light that quickly deciphered the structure of the entire world. "What is that?" Ishin Shiba and Makoto Kurosaki's attention was attracted by the aura of the ancient Desolation era. Their expressions changed. Especially when Ishin instinctively retreated. When he regained his senses, he was shocked, and his mind was in a mess. How evil! Shinozaki Manori was also mentally prepared. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. As far as she knew, voidness was the most evil thing in the world. However, compared to that strange spiral sword, the so-called voidness was not even worth mentioning. It's normal to feel fear. After all, this thing can sever the entire world. Dustless said softly as he gripped the Gwaili sword. With a gentle flick of his thumb, the Gwaili sword spun at high speed as if it was turning its head. A dark red hurricane of destruction swept out. The red hurricane descended upon the world. From an insignificant small tornado, it instantly expanded thousands of times. If not for Dustless deliberately suppressing it, Kangzucho would have collapsed in the blink of an eye. The red hurricane was extremely terrifying. The moment it appeared, it tore apart the void. The originally clear day dimmed, and it was as if they had arrived at the depths of the dark and cold universe. Ishin Shiba's moonless sword, which he had used all his strength to cast, was destroyed by the hurricane. The destroyed void was extremely horrifying. The ghastly cracks were enough to send chills down one's spine. Every time it was repaired, it would be shattered by the remnant energy of the good separation sword. The cycle continued until the remnant energy of the good separation sword was completely destroyed. Dustless looked at Ish and Sheba, but he was surprised to find that the kid had disappeared. Oh, F***ck. I was careless. Dustless suddenly slapped his head and cursed, that kid is really smart. He's as cunning as a rabbit. Kurosaki did not know whether to laugh or cry. He looked deeply at Dustless and said bluntly, you can't even lie to a 3-year-old child. You must have let him go on purpose. You're helping your enemy. Dustless did not deny it. He admitted, so what if I help my enemy? If he really has the ability to kill me in the future, I will thank God. Dustless touched the Hogyoku on his chest and looked helpless. If it was in the past, he would definitely kill the dangerous enemy in advance. However, the evolution of the Hogyoku was too strange. Dustless had to be afraid of death in order to evolve to a higher realm. What kind of person could make Dustless feel afraid? Of course, it was someone stronger than him. It would be best if Ish and Sheba could surpass Dustless's level in the future. Let's go. It's time to experiment on you. The sky was dark. In a foreign world, there was no end to it. It was dead and there was no one around. At this moment, the void distorted and a large whirlpool appeared. 2 figures stepped out of it. This is my, God's might, space. It's in another dimension, so no one will disturb us. Don't worry. Wuchin explained when he saw Shinozaki Manori looking around suspiciously. Alright, take off your clothes. Wuchin glanced at Shinozaki Manori and said indifferently. Take off my clothes. Kurosaki's expression froze. She hesitated and was obviously embarrassed. Kurosaki looked at Dustless from the corner of her eyes. She saw that his eyes were as clear as water. There was not a trace of lust in them. Kurosaki gritted her teeth and nodded. However, Dustless's next sentence made her suspicious. Hurry up and take it off. I promise I won't peek at you. Wuchin said impatiently as he felt helpless towards Shinozaki's hesitation. Kurosaki's face was full of doubts. Just as she was about to ask, the strange spiritual pressure in her body went berserk. Her expression changed and she undressed without hesitation. Chapter 1066. Shinozaki Minori's skin was as white as snow. It was smooth and smooth. It was as if there were no impurities in it. Shinozaki Mikoto's figure was also extremely hot. She had a voluptuous figure with a curvy front and back. She had a lot of curves in the right places and a lot of curves in the right places. However, Dustless did not have the time to appreciate such a soul-stirring scene. It's a miracle that you can still retain your consciousness even with this thing. I give you full marks for your desire for life. There was a hole in Shinozaki Mikoto's chest. It was slightly smaller than a fist and it penetrated her entire body. Shinozaki Mikoto's sweat dripped down like raindrops. You still have time to be sarcastic. Heal me. I can't hold on for long. Shinozaki Mikoto reminded when she saw that Dustless was not doing anything. Don't worry, I won't let you die so quickly. There are some things that I need to promise you. Inside the dead silent space of Shinwei, Wuchin took out a blade of grass from nowhere and held it in his mouth frivolously. He was so relaxed and comfortable that he sat on the ground with his buttocks and remained motionless. You. Don't you feel pain when you talk while sitting? Shinozaki Mikoto was furious and glared at Dustless. She could feel that something was wrong in her body. The power of the Great Void was gradually eating away at her spiritual pressure. Her mind was in a trance and sometimes it was good and sometimes it was bad. The roar of the Great Void came out of her mouth. It's actually very easy to suppress the Great Void in your body. You just need to. Looking at Shinozaki Mikoto, who was in pain, Dustless knew that it was not the time to drag it on. He said, you just need to inject a power that is completely opposite to the Great Void. In other words, the power of the Grim Reaper will suppress the Great Void's spiritual pressure and you will not become void. However, your pure blood that belongs to Quincy will be contaminated. Dustless stopped and waited for Shinozaki Mikoto's decision. Just do it, there's no problem. Shinozaki Mikoto's tone was firm. That's good. Seeing this, Dustless nodded slightly and immediately sneered, I will inject my own spiritual pressure and soul into your body, but there will be something special in it that will seal a certain technique. But there is no need to worry, it will not affect your normal life. Shinozaki Mikoto pouted with obvious dissatisfaction. Regardless of whether the Kage affected his daily life or not, no one would want to have something inexplicable placed in his body. Forget it, let's hurry up and get ready. The cheerful Shinozaki Mikoto smiled and said with a relieved tone. Dustless didn't waste any time. He quickly got up and walked to Kurosaki Mako's side. He injected his spiritual pressure and soul into her body to suppress the void. With Dustless's help, Shinozaki Jindo was safe and sound in the end, and he successfully implanted the transcription seal in Shinozaki Jindo's body. With Dustless's current strength, he could place the transcription seal into anyone's body at will, but its power would be greatly reduced. Therefore, he placed it into the soul and spiritual pressure that he had implanted in Shinozaki Mako. Once Yawatch used the saint ability to forcibly extract Shinozaki Jindo's power, it meant that Dustless's power would be devoured by Yawatch. The Amaterasu, sealed in the transcription seal, would burn. Amaterasu was the most effective against a person's soul. Time passed, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Shinozaki Jindo left safely, and Dustless naturally returned to Soul Society. Soul Society held the same captain's meeting as usual. Is this true? Inside a team house, Yamamoto frowned as he listened to Dustless's report. Yes, head captain. Dustless's expression was serious as he answered. The situation had been exaggerated by him, and the gist of it was that Shiba Ishin was severely injured and was unfortunately killed by Void White. As for Wu Chen, he went through untold hardships to kill White Void and take revenge for Shiba Ishin. Allah! Captain Dustless's captain on a mission is always in trouble. Ikemara Jin chuckled, and his tone was obviously criticizing. That's why, Captain Ikemara Jin, don't ever meet me. Otherwise, the next unlucky one may be you. Dustless naturally didn't want to be outdone and immediately retorted. It's considered a perfect mission, but it's a pity that we lost Captain Shiba. Head Captain Yamamoto was so upset that he wanted to vomit blood. In Soul Society, there were always captains who were killed or died from other unnatural causes. Not bringing back that void is a serious crime. Mayuri said unhappily. His 12th Division put in a lot of effort to capture Void White, but in the end, they didn't even get a single strand of hair. Losing the wife and losing the soldiers. The collection of souls is almost done, and the other Hogyoku is almost complete. It won't be long before we start. Aizen sneered as he glanced at Dustless. Aizen Sosuke had an unforgettable hatred for Dustless. Ever since Dustless appeared, Aizen Sosuke felt like there was a giant wall in front of him, making him extremely difficult to deal with. Once there was a suitable opportunity, Aizen would never let Dustless go. When the new Hogyoku is completed, it's time for you to die. Aizen closed his eyes and began to think of a plan to use Kyoka Suigetsu to deal with Dustless through Central 46 to deal with Dustless. He knew that Urahara Kasuke's half Hogyoku was still in Dustless's hands, and it was impossible for him to hand it over. He could only order the entire Soul Society to deal with Dustless. Chapter 1067. After another hour, the captain's meeting finally came to an end. Every time they talked about something trivial, but old man Yamamoto was very happy about it. Every time they had a meeting, except for his sickly disciple, Jushiri Yukitake, everyone else had to be present. No one was allowed to escape. Long time no see, Chinkuen. After the captain's meeting, all the captains left one after another. Uno Hanaretsu came up to greet him with a smile, but soon after, her face wrinkled with dissatisfaction as she said unhappily, Chinkuen seems to have been avoiding me recently. Hearing this, Dustless bitterly smiled and decisively said, Retsu, that's just your imagination. Recently, I've been busy with work. You know that I rarely have time to rest. Almost every day, I have a lot of work to do. I haven't had the chance to relax recently. Dustless quickened his pace, wanting to escape. He was indeed purposely avoiding Uno Hanaretsu. This woman's nose was just too sensitive, and the word smart was not enough to describe her. Chinkuen, Uno Hanaretsu dragged out her words with a complicated expression. This, looking at Uno Hanaretsu's sorrowful face, Dustless was speechless. He suddenly realized that he was a bit cruel. When he first came to Soul Society, it was always Uno Hanaretsu who helped him. Now, he was avoiding Uno Hanaretsu for no reason, just because she was too smart. It was indeed a bit unreasonable. Retsu, you're thinking too much. I suffered quite a bit of injuries when dealing with a great void in the modern world. I was just about to go to the 4th Division to ask for your help. Dustless changed his tone and said with a smile. Uno Hanaretsu nodded and led the way. Is that void very strange? It can actually injure you. Uno Hanaretsu asked in surprise. She knew Dustless's strength very well. Looking at the distant horizon, Dustless did not think much of it. Of course, he was just making things up to fool Uno Hanaretsu. Although void was very strong, it was impossible for it to injure him. He immediately replied, yes, he is very strong. He even knows the death god's ghost Tao. He is worlds apart from the great void realm that I know of. It took me a lot of effort to get rid of him. Uno Hualai did not doubt Dustless's words at all. That day, the 12th Division had indeed detected a large amount of spiritual pressure in the modern world. Looking at Uno Hualai's face, Dustless suddenly felt sorry for her. He had only made up a story, but Uno Hualai had actually believed it without a doubt. Dustless was touched, but at the same time, he felt guilty. Lie. Dustless turned to look at Uno Hualai's gentle face and said seriously, if I betray Soul Society one day, which side will you choose to side with? Uno Hualai was stunned upon hearing this. She stared at Dustless's face and felt troubled. This choice is truly vexing. After a while, Uno Hua sighed helplessly. She had been loyal to Soul Society for 1,000 years, so Uno Hualai could not easily abandon her beliefs. On the other hand, Dustless could barely be considered a close friend, so she could not easily give up her beliefs. There's no need to feel troubled, Lai. Seeing this, Dustless was somewhat disappointed. This was within his expectations. After all, he had only known Uno Hualai for a little more than a year. 1,000 years versus a short 1 year, it was clear which was more important. If you betray Soul Society, I will definitely side with you and destroy Soul Society. After a while, Dustless suddenly said. His eyes were filled with determination, and his clear eyes were as firm as a boulder. In Dustless's heart, Soul Society and Uno Hualai's feelings were not proportional. If he had to choose between the two, he would definitely side with Uno Hualai without hesitation. Uno Hualai's heart that had been sealed for 1,000 years loosened, and a warm current flowed through her heart. After 1,000 years, she, who had observed people to the smallest detail, could naturally tell that Dustless's words were from the bottom of his heart. His sincerity was without any pretense. No matter how young you are, you're still an adult. If the head captain hears this, he'll make a big fuss. Uno Hualai did not know whether to laugh or cry, but she was very touched. "Oh right, Chenjun, the 4th Division has a lot of injured people from a few days ago. They're still waiting for me to take care of them. I'll take my leave first." Dustless nodded and said, "Do as you wish." As expected, she still can't let go of Soul Society. Looking at Uno Hualai's disappearing figure with a complicated expression, Dustless felt a sense of loss. At the same time, he laughed at himself. According to his previous temperament, he would not hesitate to ruthlessly destroy such an untactful woman. However, for some reason, he did not have such extreme emotions when facing Uno Hualai. He only wanted to respect her choice and did not have any other thoughts. The sky gradually darkened. At night, the sky was filled with stars. The moonlight was like a plate, and the starlight that filled the sky was extremely beautiful. "Captain, I have something to do, I need to take leave." Matsumoto Ranju had an "I'm very busy" expression, as if something big had really happened. However, Dustless ignored her. Her so-called matter was actually going to drink. "Forget it, go. Remember to come back quickly." Waving his hand, Dustless gestured for Matsumoto Ranju to scram. Since he had nothing to do recently, let her do as she pleased. Dustless did not restrict the movements of these team members. Matsumoto Ranjaku suddenly smiled and disappeared in front of Dustless like a storm. "This is unfinished work." Looking at the documents on the table in front of him, Dustless muttered to himself. Out of boredom, he picked up the documents and carefully read them. After a while, his expression became incomparably serious. "Strange, this can't be an accident. There must be a problem," Dustless said sternly after reading a few times and confirming that his eyes were not blurred. Chapter 1068. Staring at the information, Dustless was deeply puzzled. This was too strange. "Captain, is there something wrong?" Rukia looked at the intoxicated Dustless and asked. Her captain was rarely as serious as he was today. "Where did you get this information?" Wu Chen, who came back to his senses, asked instead of answering. His tone was full of suspicion. This, Xiao Mu and Lu Chia came over, and a burst of seductive fragrance also came over, causing Wu Chen's heart to become restless. "It seems that Captain Ye sent it a few days ago." At that time, the captain was rushing to the modern world for a mission, so he left it here and didn't see it until now. Tilting her head, Rukia explained. "That means no one knows." Hearing this, Dustless's mind moved. The content of the information was very simple, just a few words. The 12th Division detected a high-density Ryatsu explosion in Central Room 46. Those so-called sages were weak, so it was impossible for them to have a Ryatsu explosion, and they seemed to have died long ago. But Sosuke Aizen's laboratory seemed to be under Central Room 46. Maybe another Hogyoku was successfully created, causing a Ryatsu explosion. Although it was just a guess, Dustless was very sure that it was the birth of another Hogyoku. When he fused two Hogyoku, a similar large-scale Ryatsu explosion occurred, very similar to what Nekomori said. He actually created another Hogyoku so quickly, Dustless was surprised. Although Aizen had his own research materials, it was unimaginable that he could create a Hogyoku in such a short time. It would only take a little more than a month at most. Creating a Hogyoku requires a lot of souls. Where did he get them? Dustless frowned and was very puzzled. Recently, there were no signs of souls disappearing. Even if there were, it was done by Su-Bai a while ago. After being destroyed by Dustless, it was rare for souls to disappear. The amount of souls needed to create a Hogyoku was even more massive. No matter what tricks you have up your sleeves, it will all be futile in the end. Thinking about Sosuke Aizen's current strength, Dustless felt relieved. Although he had the strength of a super captain, it wasn't enough to make a difference. Let nature take its course. After a while, Dustless heaved a heavy sigh of relief. He suddenly realized that he was paying too much attention to Sosuke Aizen. In the end, Sosuke Aizen was just a small character. There was no need to care too much about his actions. In the dark laboratory, the previous East Sensei was suppressed, so only Jin and Sosuke Aizen were left. Creak, the iron door was pushed open, revealing Sosuke Aizen's figure. At this moment, he had a smile on his face and his tone was very happy. His steps were vigorous, he seemed to be in a good mood. In his hand was a blue bead that was almost identical to Dustless's Hogyoku. Jin, how's the news from our allies? They seem to be impatient. I don't know what Dustless did to provoke them. But this is good. We are weak compared to Captain Dustless. Although our allies are dangerous, we have the same goal. Plus, they helped me complete the Hogyoku. Aizen's tone was sincere, but it didn't take long before his tone turned cold. But if they want to use us, they're dreaming. I have received the exact news. Aizen played with the Hogyoku in his hand and said coldly. Fusing with Urahara Kasuke's Hogyoku can make up for this Hogyoku. So I have decided to attack Captain Dustless soon. Join forces with that group of Quincy. Ikemara Jin asked, his tone was filled with fear. Not long ago, Quincy and Sosuke Aizen secretly contacted each other. Ikemara Jin thought Aizen would directly refuse, but he accepted Jugram's proposal. He was willing to deal with Dustless together. As proof of their friendship, Jugram took out a large number of souls for Aizen to complete the Hogyoku quickly. Of course not. They are just rats hiding in the shadows. The key is to rely on us. Sosuke Aizen said. Ikemara Jin scoffed at Quincy and sneered, 1,000 years ago, they left the stage of history, and now they're back with a vengeance. I don't know what relationship Captain Dustless has with Quincy. That's not important, Sosuke Aizen smiled mysteriously. Joining forces with me is just a kill with a borrowed knife. But that Jugram guy is too arrogant. After dealing with Captain Wuchin, I'll tell Head Captain Yamamoto about Quincy's whereabouts. What kind of interesting things will happen then? It's really exciting. Ikemara Jin nodded. He agreed with Aizen's plan. Using Quincy's power to complete the Hogyoku and mobilizing the entire Soul Society to deal with Dustless. Then he will tell Yamamoto about Quincy's hidden Wandenrake. Killing several birds with one stone. Dustless didn't know what Aizen was thinking. At this moment, he was enjoying Unohana's treatment in the 4th Division. Inside the misty hot spring, Wuchen was lying in it, swimming around in satisfaction. This was a special hot spring created by Unohana. It was the same as last time. It could be used to heal injuries. Dustless was using it as a place to have fun. Chapter 1069. Only Dustless and Unohua Lai were in the sealed room. With the experience of the hot spring last time, Dustless was much calmer this time. He even ignored Unohua Lai and swam around like a child. Chen Jun's body's recovery is really amazing. Looking closely at Dustless's smooth skin, it was white and tender, without any blemishes. It was so smooth that even Unohana found it dazzling when she looked at it through the reflection of the light. Unohua could not help but feel incredulous. She subconsciously touched her own skin and felt a sense of defeat. She was shocked to find that her skin was not as good as Dustless. Half an hour ago, she had bandaged Dustless's skin and it was as smooth as white jade. This brat. Unohua Lai shook her head and felt conflicted. She never thought that she would lose to someone because of this, especially when the opponent was a man. Chen Jun, aren't you worried? Seeing Dustless enjoying himself like a little fish, Unohua Lai cautiously reminded him. Even if the sky falls, the captain will hold it up. There is no need for people like us to worry. Dustless swam around Lai. The two of them only covered each other's private parts. He handed a towel to Lai and suddenly stopped in front of her. You really know how to enjoy yourself. Lai looked at Dustless, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She took the towel and began to gently wipe Dustless's back like last time. This feels so good. Swaying his body, Dustless was so happy that he almost fell into Lai's arms. Dustless believed that he was the first person in Soul Society who could make Lai take the initiative to wipe his back. Chen-jun, after a while, Lai whispered into Dustless's ears. She then quietly wiped Dustless's back and did not say anything else. What is it, Lai? Dustless slightly opened his eyes and calmly asked. He felt that something was wrong with Hua today. She was the complete opposite of her usual self. She seemed to have a lot on her mind. Are you planning to betray Soul Society in the future? Hua's words caused Wu Chen's eyes to instantly open. Blood vessels appeared in his eyes. He abruptly turned his head and stared at her extremely complicated face. Wu Chen's expression quickly changed, and his emotions became very varied. If it was someone else who asked him this question, his throat would have been slit. Lai, do you want to hear me tell you the truth or a lie? His pupils emitted a cold light. Wu Chen felt that some things had to be made clear. It was not a good idea to drag it on. Of course, the truth. Lai said, rolled her eyes. No one wanted to hear lies. Wu Chen nodded and immediately said bluntly, I did intend to betray Soul Society and even wanted to destroy it. The system of this world is too rotten. Of course, I also have my own selfish desire, to devour the Spirit King. Are you crazy? Lai's eyes widened. For the first time, she felt that the usually wise Dustless had lost his mind. Crazy? You're right to think so. In your eyes, Spirit King is a living person with flesh and blood. How can you devour it? In reality, that is not the case. Dustless walked behind Lai with a smile and began to rub her back. His technique was very experienced. Occasionally, he would deliberately take advantage of her. Perhaps because Dustless's words were too shocking, the absent-minded Lai did not notice. The essence of the Spirit King's existence is to stabilize the three realms, which is the stability of the main realm, Hueco Mundo, and Soul Society's souls entering and leaving. As for the person who created the Spirit King, it was actually Soul Society. The so-called Spirit King was created by Soul Society. Without hiding anything, Chen said something shocking. We, a group of death gods, are willing to obey a created lie. Lie. Don't you think it's very funny? Maybe you don't know, but 1,000 years ago, that Yawachu you fought was very likely a part of Spirit King's body. Who told you all this? It's very likely that someone made it up to deceive you. Lai took a deep breath and questioned. Hearing this, Dustless slightly raised his eyebrows. Then, he whispered into Lai's ear, extracting other people's memories is one of my abilities. I once extracted the memories of Yawacha's subordinates. I can guarantee that all of this is real. Dustless said half-heartedly. He could not say that he had transmigrated. Lai stared at Dustless's face. After a while, she suddenly sighed, you should understand, I know that you're the first Sword 8. I also know that you followed Yamamoto for 1,000 years. I also know that you have a deep relationship with Squad 0. However, telling you all of this. Lai, you should understand what I mean, Lai bitterly smiled. She naturally understood what Dustless meant. In reality, he was forcing her to make a choice. She could either side with Dustless or fight with Dustless right now. I'll tell you all of this, as well as my plan. I just want to say that I'm sincere towards you. I don't have any other motives. Wu Qin said indifferently. He then tried to pull Uno Hua into his arms. At first, she reacted violently, but in the end, she seemed to have given up and let him do as he pleased. She even leaned on Wu Chen's shoulder tiredly with a worried expression. There's a chance. Dustless chuckled inwardly. Forcing the other party to compromise was the same as undressing Jun Quan. Although they were both pleasurable, being able to charm the other party was clearly more challenging and gave him a greater sense of accomplishment. This would save the girls in the system from calling Dustless an unreasonable bandit every day. Chapter 1070. Seeing Uno Hua lying in his arms, Dustless immediately displayed his strongest ability apart from fighting. His hands began to move up and down Uno Hua's body, teasing her sealed and pure heart. He would always touch a certain sensitive spot, causing Uno Hua's body to gradually heat up. At the same time, his mouth did not stop, occasionally blowing hot air into Uno Hua's ears. In just a few minutes, Uno Hua began to pant heavily and her eyes became blurry. Hurry up, and stop. After a while, Uno Hua, who could not take it anymore, began to violently twist her body. In just a short while, Dustless was already messing with her, causing her mind to tremble. Uno Hua even suspected that in another half an hour, her IQ would drop to negative levels. You're not old, but you're an expert in this area. Uno Hua rolled her eyes at Dustless and pouted. Hee, there's no harm in having more skills. In this day and age, it's important to develop in all areas. Dustless laughed embarrassedly and teased Uno Hua. At the same time, he was overjoyed. After so many years, he was no longer the ignorant brat from before. Naturally, he knew the principle of adapting to changes. He immediately put on a loyal expression and promised solemnly, You've helped me for so many years, and I will never forget your kindness. I only have one heart that has never changed, a heart that only weighs 200 grams. The only place left in my heart is you. After saying that, if not for Uno Hua's existence, Dustless would have given himself a slap. Uno Hua had only taken care of him for a year. As for many years, that was complete nonsense. Once the inspiration came, stopping was as hard as ascending to the heavens. Fortunately, Uno Hua did not care about this. She softly pondered, I'm not interested in what you said before. I just want to know what you think of the future of Soul Society. Do you plan to eliminate all of the death gods? Hearing this, Dustless resolutely shook his head. He had never thought of such a ridiculous idea before. My goal is to devour the Soul Kings, or rather, replace them. Those death gods can't give me any benefits, and killing them will take a lot of time. It's not worth it, and there's no value. Without even thinking about it, Dustless directly spoke the truest thoughts in his heart. Is that so? That's for the best. Uno Hua let out a sigh of relief. Her tense nerves also visibly relaxed. She had a special relationship with Soul Society, and countless people who were familiar with her. Naturally, she did not want them all to be killed by Dustless. At that moment, his thoughts of resisting Dustless were greatly reduced. By the way, why do you know so, from the first generation from the sword? Dustless. From Dustless, lies from lies, ants, lies, lie, the number from the hand and hand, from the soul from God. Because back then, Quincy was not destroyed. Without hiding anything, Dustless directly said, his subordinate, you might know Jugram, is the one who led Quincy to continue to struggle at death's door, silently waiting for the day Yawatch awakens. That man didn't die. Uno Hua's mind went blank, and she asked in shock. Of course, he's the god of Quincy. How could he be killed so easily? Back then, he was only defeated by the captain, who sealed him in the end. Dustless softly explained, ignoring the shocked Uno-Hualai, and continued, not only did he not die, but Yawatch also had the same goal as me, devouring the Soul King. Soul King. What's so special about him? It's not like he's a spiritual pressure that you can eat as you please. Uno-Hualai felt a headache coming on. Soul Society's guards were absolutely loyal, but when it came to Dustless and Yawatch, they were treated like food, and anyone could take a bite out of them. I told you before that the so-called Soul King was actually created by Soul Society to stabilize the entry and exit of souls. In other words, it's an amalgamation of souls. Devouring it means that one's soul will explosively increase, so it's naturally a target for tigers and wolves. Dustless lightly smiled as he explained, his tone carrying a hint of passion. If Naruto was a place where one fought for chakra, then Shinigami was a place where one fought for souls. The strength of one's soul determined the strength of one's spiritual pressure. Gulp. Uno-Hualai choked, clearly tempted. She naturally understood the importance of souls to Shinigami. Not just Shinigami, even voids had a huge effect, and the benefits were unimaginable. If that's the case, then why hasn't anyone tried to take the Soul King? If it's really as golden as you say, then it should attract the attention of all creatures. Uno-Hualai continued to ask. It wasn't that she doubted Dustless's words, but that it was simply too shocking and beyond anyone's expectations. It's not that they don't want to devour it, but there's a huge drawback to devouring the Soul King, and it's very likely that it will harm them. After the Soul King collapses, the three realms, Hueco Mundo, Soul Society, and the modern world, will all collapse. Now do you understand the use of the Soul King? What's your choice, Lai? Dustless expectantly asked, his face full of hope. You also want to devour the Soul King? Uno-Hualai frowned. After the Soul King disappeared, it would mean that the entire world would turn into ashes, and the consequences would be unimaginable. At that time, all living things might disappear. Hueco Mundo, the modern world, and Soul Society would all disappear, becoming history. No. I'm not Yawatch. He indeed wants to devour the Soul King after killing it. Although I also want to kill the Soul King, the meaning is different. In other words, I only want to replace it and become the new Soul King, dominating the entire world. Chapter 1071. Unohana stared straight into Dustless's eyes. She could tell that it was not a lie, and she could clearly feel Dustless's heartbeat. I'm going to reject your offer. Are you going to kill me now? Uno-Hualai changed the topic and spoke in a different tone. Silence me. Dustless shook his head resolutely. Even if Unohana went to the head captain, he would not be afraid. That's not important. Even if head captain Yamamoto knew that I would betray him, he would not be able to stop me. The decision has always been in my hands. Soul Society has no right to choose. Wuchen spoke frankly and confidently, filled with deep confidence. Moreover, Ray, you seem to have forgotten something. No matter what, Soul Society is the unlucky one. Even if I let them go, don't forget that Yawatch is still there. Eradicating all the Grim Reapers and washing away the shame of the past is his long-cherished wish. His casual words caused Uno-Hualai's heart to fall to the bottom. That's about it. Dustless's mind raced. He knew that as long as he could break Unohana's last line of defense, he would get what he wanted. He continued to pressure her. According to my observations, Wanless Empire is far stronger than the Grim Reapers. Although the Sternritter Legion only has a few dozen people, they have the strength to wipe out all the Grim Reapers. Unohana's words stirred up 1,000 ripples. After recovering from her shock, Unohana questioned, how is that possible? 1,000 years ago, Quincy's strength was only a so-so. It's impossible for him to defeat Soul Society. Seeing the disbelief on Unohana's face, Dustless chuckled and continued, "Take note, when I say all the Grim Reapers, I don't just mean Soul Society, but also Squad Zero." In the end, the Sternritter Legion did defeat the Godii 13 and reached the Spirit King Palace. Even Yawatch's personal guards were wiped out. Ray, Yawatch is a threat in the future. Don't forget that there's still a vicious dog eyeing Soul Society. He's just as ambitious and dangerous as Yawatch. Dustless suddenly revealed. His tone was full of meaning, and a figure immediately appeared in Unohana's mind. "You mean Sosuke Aizen?" Her thoughts paused for a second as Unohana couldn't help but say, "I've always felt that he was very dangerous. He always looked harmless on the surface, but he always gave me the feeling of a poppy flower." You're so smart." Dustless looked at Unohana Retsu in surprise. He had a new understanding of this woman's intelligence. She was probably the only one in the Godii 13 who could see through Sosuke Aizen. But he's very meticulous. It'll be difficult to catch him. Unohana Retsu frowned. She felt that Sosuke Aizen was a difficult opponent. That's normal. Dustless's expression didn't change. Aizen was wise and shrewd, and he had Kyoka Suigetsu to protect him from the wind and rain. The chance of catching him was close to zero. What did Soul Society do? Unohana Retsu sighed. Unohana Retsu let out a long sigh. Her voice was filled with worry as she said in annoyance, "Before, Yawatch was already a headache, and now there's you and Sosuke Aizen. Plus, that Yawatch that should have died is about to see the light of day again. Soul Society is truly plagued with disasters. Who knows?" Dustless shrugged. Soul Society was indeed in a difficult situation. It was synonymous with tragedy. Whether it's a coincidence or fate, Soul Society is about to face a great change. Which side will you side with in the end? Then, the room became silent. Dustless waited for Unohana Retsu's decision. She was smart and knew what to choose. Unohana Retsu rolled her eyes at Dustless and said helplessly, "If it's really like what you said, I have no choice." Looking at Dustless, Unohana Retsu didn't need to say anything. Hearing this, Dustless's lips curled into a smile. He hugged Unohana Retsu and was about to do the most primitive thing, when an untimely voice sounded. "I only agreed to help you, but I never said I'd give myself to you." Unohana Retsu couldn't help but laugh at Dustless's anxiousness. "What does that have to do with anything? Since we're already honest with each other, why don't we take it a step further? We're in the same boat anyway." Dustless directly pulled off the towel on his body, revealing his strong body. "No." Unohana Retsu refused again. Although her voice was as soft and pleasant as before, Dustless could hear the meaning behind it. "You dare to talk to me like this? Do you believe that I'll directly forget it?" Unohana Retsu poured a bucket of cold water on his head. Dustless was inwardly annoyed. Just as he was about to forcefully take Unohana Retsu's hand, he saw the sadness in her eyes, and the flames in his heart disappeared. There's still a long way to go. Now is not the time. After saying this, Dustless quietly hugged Unohana Retsu, feeling the warmth of each other's bodies. Perhaps it was because he was too tired recently, but a drowsy feeling spread throughout his body. Dustless was about to fall asleep when a soft, jade-like hand suddenly grabbed his most important part. His pupils instantly opened and enlarged several times. Looking over, he saw that it was Unohana Retsu, who had a shy expression. "I'm sorry, Chin-jun. I still have some things to do right now. I'll leave them to you in the future." Seeing Dustless's gaze that could melt a person, Unohana Retsu lowered her head. The hard thing in her hand made her feel awkward. "Please continue. Do whatever you want. Ignore me." After saying this, Dustless closed his eyes in satisfaction. Chapter 1072. It was not until 2 hours later that Wuchen walked out of the hot spring dizzily. His expression was absent-minded and his eyes were filled with confusion. Looking strangely at the calm Uno Hua lie beside her, Wuchen felt ashamed of her inferiority. She was sure that Uno Hua Lai was still a virgin, but her knowledge in certain aspects made Wuchen, a veteran in the field of flowers, feel ashamed. According to Uno Hua Lai, I was born to understand those things. TSK. I finally have an ally in soul society, and one that is extremely reliable. Dustless smiled as he looked at Uno Hua Lai's back. Originally, he had wanted to tempt Uno Hua Lai into putting her hands on his mouth in order to pursue the feeling of the extreme. At first, Uno Hua Lai had rejected him resolutely, leaving no room for negotiation. Later, after Dustless signed a few unfair terms, Uno Hua Lai accepted Dustless's suggestion and used her mouth to seduce Dustless. Even until now, Wuchen still hadn't had enough of the feeling of walking on clouds. His mind was still in a trance, and the scene of Uno Hua Lai lying on top of him kept echoing in his mind. Smiling so wretchedly. I'm sure you're up to no good. Uno Hua Lai turned her head and glanced at Dustless. Seeing his naughty smile, she felt awkward. In reality, she had done those actions under Dustless's half-threat and half-seduction. Now that she thought about it, she felt angry and regretful. Uno Hua Lai's throat was still very uncomfortable, and her jawbones were not normal when she spoke. You must have used some trick to make me lose my mind, and that's why you succeeded. Uno Hua Lai's eyes shone with an ominous glint as she looked like she wanted to swallow Dustless alive. What does that have to do with me? Dustless was speechless. Uno Hua Lai was even more aggressive than him just now. This woman had been suppressed for 1,000 years. Once her conservative feelings were released, the destructive power she could create was enormous. Even though it was only an hour, Dustless was almost squeezed dry. He was swaying left and right. All right, I used an illusion to trick you. Dustless could not take it anymore and said helplessly. She knew that Uno Hua Lai was trying to make things difficult for her. Boom boom boom. At this moment, a huge spiritual pressure exploded, and a destructive shockwave swept through the entire soul society. Dustless and Uno Hua Lai, who were thousands of meters away, could feel the violent tremors. Uno Hua Lai and Dustless looked at each other and frowned. Dustless said, from the nature of the spiritual pressure, it seems to be outside of void and death. Could it be that Sosuke Aizen has created another monster? Uno Hana Retsu guessed. After Dustless's reminder, she already knew most of Sosuke Aizen's experiments. Dustless even used Tsukumi to let Uno Hana Retsu see what Sosuke Aizen was doing. It shouldn't be. Strange, this spiritual pressure is somewhat familiar. Wuchen said. He always felt that he had seen this powerful spiritual pressure before. Let's go take a look together. Seeing Dustless's confusion, Uno Hana Retsu suggested. There's no need for that. I feel like something's not right this time. Just leave this matter to me. Wuchen shook his head resolutely. Although he was very confident in Uno Hua Lai's strength, and the first Sword 8 was extremely powerful, he was not an invincible existence. There were many people who could suppress Uno Hua Lai. Bringing Uno Hana Retsu would be a problem. Especially Dustless's right eye twitched. He felt like this was not normal. I'll be going first, Retsu. Before Uno Hana Retsu could reply, Dustless turned into a flash of light and disappeared into the clear sky. In an open area, two beautiful figures were lying down. One was wearing a short skirt, and the other had long green hair. Both had great figures, and they were both women. They were wearing the same uniform, so they were obviously from the same faction. Bambietta and Candice. What's going on? Shouldn't they be in Wandless Empire? Why are they in Soul Society? It seems like they are being attacked by the death gods. Dustless, who had rushed over, was shocked. He extended his eye power to the limit and made sure he was not mistaken. Could it be that Jugram found out that they betrayed Yawatch? That shouldn't be the case. Even if he found out that they betrayed Yawatch, he should have killed Candace and Bambietta. Leaving them in Soul Society is too stupid. That might have exposed Wandless Empire. Dustless's train of thought hit a dead end. He started to think about Jugram's intentions, but he could not figure it out. At the same time, the death gods on the ground were attacking Candace and Bambietta. The death gods leading them were actually the smiling Ikamaru Jin and Mayuri. TSK, TSK, TSK. It's rare to see Quincy like you. Be careful. Don't kill them. These two Quincy girls are my test subjects. If you hurt them, I'll make you pay with your lives. Mayuri raised his voice and roared, his tone carrying a warning. Strange. Their strength seems to have weakened a lot. Dustless, who was quietly observing, was puzzled. The two girls used to be captains, but now they were not even as strong as vice-captains. They were at a disadvantage and were in a bitter fight. No matter what, Candace and Bambietta cannot be lost. In that case, I can only kill you death gods first. I have to kill them without anyone knowing. With a decision in his mind, the vigorous spiritual pressure in Wu Chen's body suddenly began to surge. Currently, Candace and Bambietta were very useful to Dustless, and it was necessary to find out why their strength had decreased. Therefore, in order not to be exposed, he had to eliminate Ikamaru Jin and Mayuzumi Riki. Chapter 1073. The captain's strength was extremely powerful. Even a scientist like Mayuri was extremely strong, especially through various abnormal experiments to improve his strength, which was also unique. Although the method was not complementary, it was undeniable that some of Mayuri's research was very useful. Captain Dustless. What brings you here? It's rare. Mayuri looked up at the black spot that was rapidly approaching, and couldn't help but ask in confusion. While talking, Dustless also landed on the ground, only a few steps away from Nico Ray and Ikamaru Jin. How did you find them, Captain Mayuri? Pointing at Candace and Bambietta who were besieged, Dustless asked as usual. The Technology Development Bureau doesn't seem to have the time to search for Quincy. Of course not, looking for this group of trash. What a joke. They're just test subjects. I'm very busy, and I don't have time to look for this group of white mice. Thank you, Captain Jin. Mayuri's face was flushed, and there was a hint of gratitude in his tone as he said excitedly, "This is all thanks to Captain Ikamaru Jin. She was the one who provided me with the traces of these two Quincy. Furthermore, there's something wrong with these two Quincy girls. They're completely different from the Quincy that I studied before." At the end of his words, Mayuri waved his arms, and his slender fingertips jumped with cold light, which could easily pierce the skin, making people shudder. So it's Jin. Hearing this, Dustless's gaze immediately turned to Jin, and his eyes turned cold. At the same time, Jin also looked at Dustless, and his eyes were full of ridicule and schadenfreude, waiting for Dustless to make a fool of himself. Captain Jin, after sorting out his thoughts, Dustless was not in a hurry to act, but asked directly, "These two are Quincy, you should at least explain their origin." Yes, where did these two guys come from? Mayuri nodded wildly, and his face was surging with morbid excitement. He said fanatically, "They must have accomplices. Catch them all and send them to my operating table." This is the essence of Quincy's existence. Ikamaru Jin was extremely calm when he heard this. He had expected this. When I was patrolling Luhan Street, I noticed unusual Ryatsu fluctuations. When I rushed over, I happened to meet these two Quincy. I originally wanted to kill them directly, but I heard that Captain Nia was recently doing experiments on Quincy, so I found him. Ikamaru Jin spoke with assurance. His words were clear and logical, without any loopholes for others to exploit. Looks like Jugram noticed their abnormality. Dustless lowered his head and looked at Jin. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he thought, this is definitely not a coincidence. Aizen and Jugram finally joined hands. Ikamaru Jin was just Sosuke Aizen's lackey. Now that he's come out to bite people, Sosuke Aizen must have instigated him. Let's get rid of them as soon as possible and let the two of them escape. Sensing that there was no one around, Dustless immediately made a decision. I deeply admire Captain Nie's persistent pursuit of science, but there's only one worry. This inexplicable sentence suddenly attracted Mayuri's attention. Frowning, Mayuri asked, "Worry? Captain Dustless using such vulgar words to describe me is too tasteless." Mayuri said with dissatisfaction, but he still asked curiously, "What's more, there's absolutely nothing in this world that I don't understand." "What are you referring to?" "You definitely don't understand this." "That's right, the world doesn't understand, including myself." With a bloodthirsty smile on his face, Dustless said mysteriously. "This guy. What's wrong with him today?" Ikamaru Jin's smile disappeared, and his heart suddenly throbbed, as if he was being stared at by an invisible ancient beast. He felt uncomfortable and uneasy. Looking at Dustless, his eyes were full of vigilance. "There's nothing in this world that I don't understand, tell me." Mayuri raised his voice and said impatiently. "Is that so? In that case, I'll fulfill Captain Nie's wish." The murderous aura hidden all over his body instantly solidified, and the nearly solidified Ryatsu directly locked onto Mayuri and Ikamaru Jin. Sensing that something was wrong, Ikamaru Jin's pupils shrunk, and he immediately retreated without hesitation. "You don't understand the miserable state you'll be in after being killed." Dustless spat out cold air, and the murderous aura in his body boiled. The black sharp light was faintly discernible, filling the surrounding space, and surrounded Mayuri and Ikamaru Jin. The corner of his mouth slightly opened, and under Mayuri's stunned gaze, countless black lights eroded him. Hado 90, Black Coffin. The black lights that surrounded the two of them instantly turned from nothingness to reality, and released a terrifying cold light. There were tens of thousands of them, and each ray of light was extremely fatal. Ikamaru Jin and Mayuri were like an extremely dense magnetic field, attracting all the black lights. "You bastard!" Mayuri's voice hadn't even fallen when the massive black light brushed past his shoulder. "Puchi! Puchi! Puchi!" The densely packed blades slanted from all directions, instantly crushing Mayuri's entire body, mercilessly tearing apart his fragile skin, destroying his internal organs, and in the blink of an eye, he was turned into a human stick, and his blood flowed like a river. Although Ikamaru Jin had fled in advance, he was still in a miserable state, and he was barely gasping for breath. "You are a pervert. This kind of death is very suitable for you, Captain Nia, there's no need to thank me." Glancing at Mayuri, who was no longer in a human shape, Dustless's face was filled with indifference, and he turned around and walked towards Ikamaru Jin with his sword in hand. Chapter 1074. Ikamaru Jin could no longer maintain his sly smile. He was terrified as he touched the wounds all over his body. He had never felt that he was so close to death. In that instant just now, if he hadn't sensed the danger of Wu Qin, perhaps he would have been cut into pieces by countless blades just like Nirvana Cocoon. It was extremely miserable. "Get out of my way." Along with a delicate shout, Candace and Bambietta pushed back the death gods who were besieging them. They were temporarily out of danger. They glanced at Wu Qin helplessly and hurriedly left. They were just burdens to Wu Qin now. "You bastard, I will not let you go." Nyahuli struggled on the brink of death. His entire body had been turned into a human stick. His limbs were broken, but he was still gnashing his teeth at Wu Qin. His distorted face wished he could tear Wu Qin into pieces. Ah, hearing this, Dustless glanced at Mayuri and sneered, "Tear me into pieces. With your level. Don't joke around, close your eyes in peace, Captain Mayuri." He gathered Ryatsu in his right hand, and a huge red disc flew out. Hado number 54, Waste Flame. Mayuri couldn't move an inch. The disc flame along with his body exploded into ashes. Mayuri, who was gritting his teeth, disappeared completely. Allah is really ruthless, killing a captain just like that. Ikamaru Jin forced a smile, but his body was bleeding non-stop. It was as if there was a hole in his body. But it's a pity that I'm not Mayuri, it's impossible to kill me. Ikamaru Jin grinned slightly, revealing a cold smile. He was very confident. Can't kill you. Hearing this, Dustless looked at him with disdain and sneered, I didn't kill you on purpose. I still have something to ask you, Captain Ikamaru Jin. For some people, it didn't matter if they were killed. They were just pawns, no big deal. For some people, they were more useful alive, so there was no need to kill them. Sure enough, these captains aren't simple. Each of them has a variety of trump cards. I'm afraid it won't be long before we leave Soul Society. Dustless's sharp senses detected that Nyahuli had turned into a mysterious liquid body and drilled into the crevice, leaving quietly. Is Sosuke Aizen's other Hogyoku completed? Dustless suddenly asked. Ikamaru Jin was shocked. You know that Captain Aizen is developing Hogyoku? Ikamaru Jin's heart was in turmoil, and he suddenly felt that his brain wasn't enough. The previous Hogyoku was destroyed by Dustless, and now he was secretly developing a new one. Only he and Aizen knew about it. Looks like that is indeed the case. Then, the source of the soul should be Jugram. Feeling relieved, Dustless immediately closed in on Jin Ikamaru like a storm. The Kusanagi sword in his hand came down in torrents, wanting to split Jin Ikamaru in half. Shocked, Ikamaru Jin immediately reacted violently. On top of his head, there was a faint blue light, and it quickly condensed into a solid wall. Bakudo 81, Skybreaker. Naive. Dustless saw this and just gently raised his finger, and a ray of golden light gathered at the tip of his foot. Lightspeed kick. The extremely dense light slanted down and hit the transparent barrier. Looks like it was blocked. Jin breathed a sigh of relief, and the goosebumps all over his body also calmed down. For a long time, Dustless's strength was like a nightmare that shrouded him and Aizen's heart. Blocked? Indeed, but that's just to attract your attention. A ghostly voice came from behind, and Jin felt a chill down his spine. His heart was in his throat, and he immediately retreated. However, in front of Dustless, that laughable speed was meaningless. He rushed forward, and the scorching hot sword light pierced through Jin. Puchi. On Jin's chest, a long and narrow scar was extremely conspicuous, and it almost covered his entire abdomen. His body was like a kite with a broken string, shaking uncontrollably. Clang! With his Zanpakuto on the ground, Jin raised his head and looked at the approaching figure. His body was extremely weak, and the scarlet wound on his chest was quickly devouring his vitality, stamina, and energy. It was just a simple slash, but it was enough to crush Jin's arrogance and kill him within seconds. They were not at the same level at all. This guy is the same kind of monster as Aizen. Jin's brain cells were thinking 10 times faster than usual. However, a black shadow approached him and coldly raised his Zanpakuto. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At this moment, another beautiful figure stood in front of Ikamaru Jin, staring at Dustless. Runju. Get out of the way. Dustless's tone softened. Captain Mayuri has already informed the entire Soul Society of what you did. Matsumoto Ranju shook her head and pulled out her Zanpakuto. Looking at Matsumoto Ranju's serious expression, Dustless smacked his lips and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Ranju. I pulled you guys into the 7th division, but in the end, I didn't give you anything and ended up in this situation." Whoosh whoosh, 2 more figures appeared on the ground. They weren't tall, but they were Rukia and Hinamori. The head captain and the rest of the division captains are here. "Captain, you should surrender and don't do anything stupid," Rukia and Hinamori also advised. Hearing this, Dustless smiled, and the Kusanagi sword in his hand glowed brighter. "If that's the case, I can only destroy the Godii 13. Chapter 1075. It was a casual sentence, but it was as simple as eating and drinking. It was full of confidence and disdain for the Shinigami. There were no superfluous emotions, only naked contempt. "You 3 should leave this place. The next battle is beyond your imagination, and it's not suitable for you." The light of the Kusanagi sword dimmed a bit. Dustless chose to let them go. Under the boundless spiritual pressure perception, Wuchen clearly captured the traces of the captains galloping over. The 3 girls looked at each other and surrounded Dustless at the same time. "You are still too weak, and this stage is not suitable for you. Try your best to survive in the future." Suddenly, a powerful repulsive force came out of his body, and they were easily killed. Shinra Tensei, Matsumoto Ranjaku, Hinamori, and Rukia were all sent flying. Dustless also remembered their old friendship and didn't hurt them. Great Sinner, 7th Division Captain Dustless. A roar filled with endless anger resounded through the sky, and a ferocious shadow behind him covered the sky. An enormous giant with a dignified expression and an ancient, solemn and dignified aura appeared. His entire being was even larger than a gigantic mountain. His murderous intent locked onto Dustless, and he couldn't wait to eat him alive. 9th Division Captain Sakumura Suogen. Dustless glanced at Sakumura Suogen coldly, then looked at the void in front of him. "Just bring it on, and don't expect me to repent." There were several black shadows attacking from that direction. "Great Sinner, Genryusai-sensei trusted you so much, and you betrayed him," Sakumura Suogen said angrily with hatred. Hearing this, Wuchen frowned coldly and said mockingly, "Stop lying. You just want to take revenge for each deity. If you have any means, just bring it on." As if the wound in his heart had been pierced, Suogen suddenly flew into a rage. Clang clang clang. With a roar, the giant saber was pulled out of its sheath. It was more than 10 meters long, shining with cold light under the refraction of the sun. It could easily cut Soul Society into pieces. "It's just a facade." Dustless's eyes were fixed on the front the whole time. Only those figures could move Dustless. As for Suogen, he was just a noob who could kill him with one move. Die! The huge long blade was filled with the anger of the left side of the village. It fell down mercilessly. The powerful force was enough to annihilate the whole world, leaving behind afterimages visible to the naked eye. Dustless didn't try to block it, nor did he try to dodge it. Therefore, the left formation of the immortal village successfully hit him. Caw caw caw, on the ground, the center of the impact directly collapsed, revealing an incomparably huge crack that rapidly spread to the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, the ground within a radius of a few hundred meters was stirred up into a mess. He was so weak that he couldn't even withstand a single blow. "That's all. Mayuri said that we should all move out. That guy has really become stupid from doing experiments all day long." Sakumura Suogen curled his lips in disdain. When he was about to withdraw his blade, he was stunned. "Strange, what's going on?" Looking down at the ground covered in smoke, Sakumura Suogen was stunned. Even with all his strength, the black rope Wrath Wisdom King's blade couldn't move. It was as if the blade was stuck in a crack between the rock walls. It was impossible to pull it out. How can this be? Did he use too much strength and cut the ground into two halves to trap the blade? It shouldn't be. Sakumura Suojin was puzzled. Realizing that something was wrong, he stomped his feet and the dust on the ground returned to normal. Sakumura Suojin was stunned when he saw the thin figure on the ground. Dustless only used one hand to grab the blade of the black rope Wrath Wisdom King. You're so big. As for your strength. Are you tickling me? I don't feel anything at all, Captain Sakumura. Tickling can help others stop their itch, but you can't even stop my itch. Useless trash. With the other hand gently flicking the huge blade, Dustless showed a contemptuous smile, and his body erupted with a violent wave, forcing Sakumura Suojin to retreat. Hado number 88, Flying Dragon Strikes Thief, Sky-Shaking Thunder Run. The thick beam of light instantly drowned the huge Bankai, the black rope Wrath Wisdom King, and hit its face. Its huge body couldn't bear the heavy burden and fell to the ground. As the host, Sakumura Suojin was also seriously injured. His dog face was severely burned, and his hair was even burned. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, at the same time, several more figures appeared on the ground. Without exception, all of them were wearing the captain's haori. They looked menacing, and their eyes were staring at Dustless. I hope you can give me a satisfactory explanation, Captain Dustless. Yamamoto shouted in a hoarse voice. There was a blazing fire behind him. It seemed that if Dustless didn't give a reasonable explanation, he would be burned to ashes. Explanation. That kind of excuse doesn't matter. Dustless was unusually perfunctory. He looked around at the captains and finally fixed his eyes on the captain. The key is my explanation useful to you? Mayuri's testimony, and Aizen Sosuke's, Kyoka Suigetsu, all of them pointed to Dustless. He couldn't explain it clearly even if he had 100 mouths, so the so-called explanation was useless. According to Dustless's guess, old man Yamamoto just wanted to find a reason to attack. You're already so old, and you still want to play this game. What a useless taste, vulgar. He deliberately raised his voice, full of sarcasm, and these words fell in everyone's ears. Everyone was worried about Dustless's courage, and they were afraid that the captain would directly release his Zanpakuto and kill Dustless. This was a joke with his life. Chapter 1076. As expected, Dustless's words attracted the head captain's hostility. However, there were too many people who wanted to flatter the head captain. Before the head captain could do anything, someone else took his place and attacked Dustless. Bakuto 63, 6-rod light prison. 6 enormous light ribbons attacked from all directions. In the blink of an eye, Dustless was restrained, and his entire person was fixed and unable to move. Captain Aizen, you've been working so hard to deal with me. You've been trying so hard to set up all kinds of schemes. His gaze fell on the elegant man. The one who took the head captain's place was Sosuke Aizen, who was filled with righteous indignation. Sosuke Aizen ignored Dustless's sarcasm with a smile of victory on his face. He was the only one who could see it. It's over. Captain of the 7th Division, a burst of cold light struck. In an instant, a proud little loli flashed in front of Wu Qin and used her special golden weapon to touch Wu Chen's throat. It was the captain of the 2nd Division, Soi Fan. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Not only that, the other captains also rushed over and subdued Dustless in an instant. Dustless was completely surrounded by captains all around him. His throat, arms, legs, and other organs were all restrained. It seemed like the outcome was already decided. There was no way out for Dustless. The head captain trusted you so much, but you betrayed him. Eisen pointed at Dustless with a trembling finger as he reprimanded him. Eisen's eyes were spitting fire, and his murderous intent was obvious. Eisen's acting was flawless, and there wasn't a single flaw in it. Everything was so perfect, extremely practiced, and there were no flaws. Dustless glanced at Sosuke Eisen and said, "If your strength and acting were at the same level, you would be invincible, Captain Eisen." Humph. Don't invert right and wrong, everyone's eyes are clear. Even if I'm not strong enough, don't forget that the Godii 13 is a team. Eisen Sosuke retorted. Staring at Dustless's calm eyes, Eisen Sosuke felt that he was being looked down upon. Dustless's calm eyes were looking at him as if he was a clown. Hurry up and put handcuffs on this traitor. Soi Feng's expression turned cold as she ordered her subordinates. Hearing this, the black-clothed Xing Jun rushed over and put the black handcuffs and leg cuffs on Dustless's feet and hands. It seemed that he felt that it wasn't safe enough, so he deliberately added a few more handcuffs. After all, this guy was a captain-level Grim Reaper, so he had to take special care of him. In that case, it's finally over. Soi Fen said casually, but her tone was bleak. She was clearly dissatisfied with the ending. A captain was captured so easily without any resistance. He was even easier to deal with than a normal thug. How boring. Little girl. You're right, it's indeed over. Looking at the handcuffs on his hands and feet, Dustless didn't react at all. His movements were normal, as if they didn't exist. He didn't even need to use his hands and feet to deal with this group of people. However, the one that's about to end and become history is Soul Society. Dustless said coldly. Everyone was stunned when they heard that. They glared angrily at Wu Qin. Their gazes were filled with dissatisfaction. They were about to open their mouths to teach this arrogant kid a lesson. A strange sense of danger appeared in everyone's heart. Wang, the ground trembled slightly, and the dust particles moved along with it. The tremors went from small to large, tearing holes in the ground. Then, under everyone's shocked gaze, the ground began to change drastically. Kakaka, a terrifying force tore the ground apart, revealing the depths of the ground. Deep red magma was boiling, and the high temperature made everyone's heart turn cold. Could it be? Seeing this scene, Head Captain Yamamoto's face changed, and an absurd idea appeared in his mind. His old eyes subconsciously looked at Dustless, and his heart turned cold. He used all his strength to remind him, "Get out of there, this is 96 Tao Breaker, cremation. The consequences of being hit are unimaginable." All the captains' faces changed, and they all retreated, distancing themselves from Dustless. It's too late. With a sneer, Dustless's face turned cold. Tao Breaker's 96 Tao Breaker, cremation. A large dark red knife-shaped flame rose from the ground, and the clear sky instantly turned dark red. All the moisture in the atmosphere, including the spiritual droplets, evaporated. The huge destructive force pulled the entire Soul Society in, and several cracks that stretched for several kilometers appeared on the ground. Looking from the sky to the ground, the central area where Dustless stood, within a radius of 10 kilometers, had almost turned into black charcoal and a forbidden land. Bang, bang, bang. This kind of indiscriminate attack completely ignored the existence of distance, and running was useless. Immediately, several captains fell like birds with broken wings. Floating bamboo. Captain Shomu. Captain Zaraki. The members of the various teams who rushed over looked at their own burned captains, and they were all stunned for a moment. All of them looked at Dustless with handcuffs and leg cuffs in horror. What kind of monster is this guy? Even with handcuffs and leg cuffs, he can still kill 3 captains in an instant. This is simply cheating. Although Dustless's figure was very thin, it made everyone retreat. When they were glanced at by his cold eyes, they felt a sense of panic as if they had fallen into hell. you're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.